Ethan Cole pressed send on his resignation letter at 11:47 p.m. 3 years of loving someone he couldn't have finally breaking him. His phone lit up instantly, not with a response to his email, but with a single word from his CEO, Madeline Ross. Help. He stared at that message, knowing he'd rescue her one more time from another disaster date, knowing it would destroy him, knowing he'd do it anyway. Because that's what love does. It saves you until it kills you. But tonight, everything would shatter. Tonight, the truth would finally speak. If you're ready for a story about the lies we tell to protect our hearts and the courage it takes to risk everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me tell you about the night everything changed. The first time Ethan Cole lied to save Madeline Ross, it felt like breathing. It was a Tuesday evening in October, 3 months after he'd started as her executive assistant at Vanguard Technologies. The office had emptied hours ago, leaving only the hum of the climate control system and the blue glow of computer monitors in sleep mode. Ethan had stayed late, not because Madeline asked, but because he always did. She worked until exhaustion pulled her from her desk, and someone needed to make sure she ate, remembered her meetings, and didn't accidentally sleep in the conference room again. He was organizing her calendar for the next quarter when her office door opened. She stood there, backlit by the San Francisco skyline, and even in the half-darkness, Ethan could read the tension in her shoulders. "I need a favor," Madeline said quietly. Ethan looked up from his laptop. "Anything." "My mother set me up on another blind date." She said it the way someone might confess to a terminal diagnosis. "I tried to cancel, but she's already told everyone at the country club, if I don't show up, I'll hear about it for months." "When?" Ethan asked, though his chest had already tightened. "Now." "Well, 20 minutes ago." Madeline checked her phone, grimaced. He's probably already ordered drinks and started talking about his portfolio. Ethan had met Madeline's mother exactly once, at the company's annual gala. Patricia Ross had smiled with her mouth but not her eyes, assessed Ethan's salary with a single glance at his shoes, and asked Madeline when she planned to stop playing CEO and focus on real priorities, like marriage. The memory still made his jaw clench. "Do you want to go?" Ethan asked. "God, no." The answer came fast, honest. Madeline ran a hand through her dark hair, disrupting the professional twist she'd worn all day. "But I don't have a good reason not to. Work emergency, family crisis, she's heard them all. She'll know I'm lying." Something shifted in Ethan's chest. A dangerous idea, reckless and absolutely certain. "What if it wasn't a lie?" he said. Madeline's eyes met his. "What?" "Give me 5 minutes." Ethan was already reaching for his phone. "Then check your messages." He didn't wait for her response. He walked to the break room, heart hammering, and dialed the office number. When it went to voicemail, because of course it did, it was past 8, he left a message that anyone monitoring calls would hear. Professional, urgent, requiring immediate CEO attention. Server failures. Data breach possibilities, client panic. Nothing true. Everything plausible. Then he texted Madeline. "Major situation. Need you back at the office ASAP. I'm so sorry." 3 minutes later, his phone rang. "You're brilliant," Madeline said. She sounded breathless. Maybe from relief, maybe from something else. "And possibly insane." "Probably both," Ethan agreed. "I'll be here when you get back." "Ethan?" "Yeah?" A pause, weighted with something he couldn't name. "Thank you." The call ended. Ethan sat in the dark break room, surrounded by the smell of burned coffee and the soft buzz of the refrigerator, and wondered what the hell he'd just started. That first lie became a template. 3 weeks later, Madeline appeared at his desk at 7 p.m., wearing a dress he'd never seen before, emerald silk that made her dark eyes look almost black, and the same trapped expression from that October evening. "Mother's friend's nephew," she said by way of explanation. "Apparently, he's very suitable." "Server crash?" Ethan offered. "Use that one. She's getting suspicious." "Client threatening to pull their contract?" Madeline considered. "That might work, but I feel terrible asking you to—" "I'm already composing the text," Ethan interrupted, fingers moving across his phone screen. "Go. Suffer through the appetizers. I'll give you 45 minutes before the crisis hits." She stared at him for a moment, something complicated moving across her face. Why are you doing this? Because I'm in love with you, Ethan thought. Because watching you pretend to be interested in men who don't deserve you is slowly killing me. Because I'd burn this whole building down if it meant you could breathe easier. Because you hate blind dates, he said instead. And I'm very good at creative problem solving. Madeline smiled, a real one, the kind that crinkled the corners of her eyes and made Ethan's chest ache. Remind me to give you a raise. I'll add it to the list. She left. Ethan waited exactly 43 minutes, long enough for her to order, short enough to escape before entrees arrived, then sent the message. 15 minutes after that, his phone rang. He was talking about his car, Madeline said without preamble. For 20 minutes. Just describing his car, the leather seats, the engine specifications. I almost texted you myself. And now? Now I'm driving back to the office where there's definitely not an emergency, and I'm probably a terrible person. You're not terrible, Ethan said firmly. You're just not interested in men who love their cars more than conversations. Is that the bar? Not loving cars more than human interaction? It's a start. Madeline laughed, and the sound traveled through the phone directly into Ethan's chest, where it settled like a warm weight. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Will you wait? I'm always here, Ethan said, and meant it in ways she'd never understand. The pattern established itself over the following months. Madeline would appear, sometimes with warning, sometimes without, wearing the armor of social obligation and the exhaustion of performing for her mother's expectations. Ethan would craft the emergency, investor calls, system failures, PR disasters, board member complaints. Anything plausible enough to justify Madeline abandoning another perfectly suitable man who bored her to tears. But something else began happening in the spaces between the lies. After the fictional emergencies, they'd end up at Frank's Diner, a 24-hour place 3 blocks from the office, with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Clinton administration. It wasn't the kind of place Madeline Ross, CEO of a $2 billion company, typically visited. It was exactly the kind of place she needed. Tell me something true, Madeline said one night in January, cradling her coffee cup between both hands. Sleet tapped against the windows. The diner was nearly empty. Just them, a tired waitress, and a man reading a paperback at the counter. Ethan looked up from his phone, where he'd been reviewing the next day's schedule. Something true? Everyone at the office tells me what they think I want to hear. My mother tells me what I should want. The men she sets me up with tell me about themselves until I want to scream. Madeline met his eyes. I want something real, even if it's small. Ethan considered. There were so many truths he could offer, that he thought about her constantly, that her laugh was his favorite sound, that he'd learned her coffee order by the second day and her moods by the first week, that loving her from this careful distance was both the easiest and hardest thing he'd ever done. I hate jazz, he said instead. Madeline blinked. What? Everyone acts like not enjoying jazz is a character flaw. Like if you don't appreciate improvisation and complex time signatures, you're culturally deficient. Ethan shrugged. But I've tried. I've listened to all the classics. I just don't like it. It sounds like musical arguments to me. A smile tugged at Madeline's mouth. Musical arguments? Everyone playing different songs in the same room, insisting it's genius. She laughed, the real laugh. Not the polished one she used in board meetings. That's the most honest opinion I've heard in months. Your turn, Ethan said. Something true. Madeline looked down at her coffee. Outside, the sleet had turned to snow, soft flakes catching in the diner's yellow light. When she spoke, her voice was quieter. I'm afraid I'm becoming my mother. The words hung between them. Ethan waited. She built this perfect life, Madeline continued. The right house, the right husband, the right social circle. Everything looked beautiful from the outside, and she was miserable. She traced the rim of her cup. I built this company because I wanted to create something meaningful, something mine. But lately I look at my calendar and see nothing but obligations, performances. I'm 34 years old and I can't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to. You come here, Ethan said gently. I come here because you rescue me. No. He leaned forward, serious. I provide the excuse. You choose to leave. There's a difference. Madeline looked at him for a long moment, snow falling behind her, and Ethan saw something shift in her expression. A recognition, maybe, or a question she wasn't ready to ask. Thank you, she said finally, for the emergencies, for this, for listening. Any time, Ethan replied, and locked the truth back in his chest where it belonged. But by spring, the rescues had become routine. Ethan could predict the pattern. Madeline's mother would call, Madeline would tense, and within hours, Ethan would receive the request. He'd crafted dozens of plausible crises. He'd become fluent in the language of corporate emergency, serious enough to justify Madeline's exit, vague enough to resolve itself conveniently by morning. But something was changing. The way Madeline looked at him sometimes, like she was trying to solve an equation she didn't fully understand. The way their conversations at Frank's diner stretched longer, deeper, touching subjects that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with who they were beneath the titles. One night in April, after rescuing her from a date with a venture capitalist who'd spent 30 minutes explaining why women weren't naturally suited for leadership positions, Madeline didn't suggest Frank's. Instead, she asked if Ethan wanted to walk. They ended up at the Embarcadero, where the bay stretched dark and vast beneath a scatter of stars. The air smelled like salt and distant rain. Madeline had changed out of her date dress into jeans and a sweater, clothes that made her look younger, softer, more herself. He actually used the phrase emotional decision-making, Madeline said, staring out at the water. As if having emotions and making decisions were mutually exclusive. As if I built a billion-dollar company by crying at spreadsheets. Some men confuse confidence with competence, Ethan said. They assume if you're not like them, you must be less than them. Do I seem emotional to you? Ethan looked at her, really looked. At the way she held herself so carefully, like something precious and breakable she was determined to protect. At the exhaustion she carried like weight on her shoulders. At the loneliness he recognized because he felt it too. You seem human, he said, which is better. Madeline turned toward him. In the lamplight, her eyes were dark and searching. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. Ethan's heart was beating too fast. They were standing too close. He could smell her perfume, something subtle, sophisticated, utterly her. I just tell you the truth. The truth, Madeline repeated softly. She looked back at the water. What if the truth is terrifying? Then you say it anyway, Ethan said, or you don't. Both take courage. They stood in silence, the bay lapping at the pier beneath them, the city glowing behind them. Ethan felt the moment stretching, elastic and fragile, full of words neither of them would speak. Finally, Madeline said, We should get back. But she didn't move immediately. And when she did, her hand brushed his. Maybe accidental, maybe not. And Ethan felt the contact like electricity. The shift was subtle but undeniable. At the office, Madeline started finding reasons to stop by Ethan's desk. She'd ask his opinion on decisions that didn't require his input. She'd share observations about board members, investors, competitors, trusting him with the unfiltered thoughts she couldn't express in meetings. Other employees noticed. Sarah from finance made a knowing comment about Madeline's favorite assistant. Marcus from development asked if Ethan had some kind of magic charm. Even James, the CFO who'd been with the company since its startup days, pulled Ethan aside one afternoon. She trusts you, James said. It wasn't quite a question, but it carried weight. That's rare. Don't take it lightly. I don't, Ethan replied. Good. James studied him with the expression of someone who'd seen too many office dynamics implode. Just remember, some lines exist for a reason. Ethan knew exactly which line James meant, the one between boss and employee, between professional and personal, between wanting and having. He was so careful with that line. He never stayed when other employees left, never suggested plans outside their post-rescue ritual, never let his feelings color his work. He was perfect, professional, and slowly dying inside. Then came the night in May that changed everything. Madeline appeared at his desk at 6 p.m. on a Saturday. Ethan had come in to catch up on work, assuming he'd be alone. But there she was, wearing casual clothes and an expression he'd never seen before, something raw and desperate. "I told her no," Madeline said. Ethan stood. "Your mother?" "She wants me to meet someone. Not a date, a potential partnership," she called it. Frederick Hawthorne. Old money, old family, old everything. Madeline's laugh was bitter. She actually said, "He could stabilize you, darling, give you perspective." "Stabilize you?" Ethan repeated, anger rising hot in his chest. "You run a company worth $2 billion. She doesn't see that as real success. To her, everything I've built is just practice, preparation for my real role as someone's wife." Madeline sat on the edge of Ethan's desk, suddenly looking exhausted. "I told her I wasn't interested. She said I was being selfish, that I was getting older, that she was only trying to help." "You're not selfish," Ethan said firmly. "You're allowed to want your own life." "Am I?" Madeline looked at him. "Because from where I'm sitting, I spend every day making decisions that affect thousands of people. And I can't even control who my mother thinks I should date." "You can," Ethan said. "You just have to be willing to disappoint her. I've been disappointing her since I chose Stanford over the family-approved college, since I started this company instead of joining the charity circuit, since I turned 30 without a ring." Madeline's voice cracked slightly. "At some point, you'd think I'd stop caring." "But you do care." Ethan moved closer, drawn by instinct and concern. "Because she's your mother. Because you're human. Because wanting her approval doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest." Madeline looked up at him, and something in her expression made Ethan's breath catch. They were too close. The office was too empty. The space between them felt charged with 3 years of careful distance finally collapsing. "What if I'm tired of being honest?" Madeline said quietly. "What if I just want to feel something other than responsible?" Ethan's heart hammered. He knew he should step back, should redirect the conversation, should remember James's warning about lines and reasons. But Madeline was looking at him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world, and he'd never been strong enough to walk away from her need. "Then feel it," he said. "Whatever it is. I'm here." Madeline stood. They were inches apart now, close enough that Ethan could see the silver flecks in her dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Ethan," she said, his name barely a whisper. His phone rang. The sound shattered the moment like glass. Ethan fumbled for the device, saw Patricia Ross's name on the screen, and understood immediately. This wasn't coincidence. Madeline's mother was checking, controlling, interfering. Madeline saw the name too. Something in her face hardened. "Don't answer it." "She might." "I don't care." Madeline took the phone from his hand and silenced it. "I'm so tired of caring what she thinks, what anyone thinks." She was still holding his phone. They were still too close. The moment stretched, taut and trembling. Then Madeline's phone buzzed, and again and again. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted from frustrated to resigned. "She's not going to stop. She'll call the office line, my emergency number, probably send someone to check on me." "Then let's give her a reason you can't answer," Ethan said. Madeline looked at him. "Another emergency?" "The biggest one yet." Ethan's mind was already working. Complete system failure, every server down, all hands on deck. You can't possibly attend dinner with Frederick Hawthorne when the entire company's infrastructure is collapsing. A smile tugged at Madeline's mouth, tired but genuine. "You're really good at this." "I've had practice." Madeline handed him back his phone. Their fingers brushed, held for a second longer than necessary. "What would I do without you?" The question felt heavier than she probably intended. Ethan forced a smile. "Suffer through a lot more bad dates." "Probably," she agreed. Then softer. "Thank you for all of it." She left before Ethan could respond. He stood alone in the empty office, holding his phone, feeling the ghost of her warmth in the space she'd occupied. Then he got to work crafting the most elaborate fictional crisis of his career. Because that's what he did. He built lies that felt like truth, created emergencies that gave her freedom, and fell deeper in love with someone he could never have. That night, for the first time, Ethan wondered if the lies were protecting her or destroying him. Quote, The summer passed in a haze of manufactured crises and late-night conversations. Madeline's mother intensified her efforts, introducing potential suitors at charity events, family gatherings, even board meetings. Each time, Madeline would find Ethan's eyes across a room, and he'd know. Another rescue required. But the dynamic was shifting. The boundaries were blurring. They spent more time together than apart. Their conversations grew more intimate, touching subjects that had nothing to do with work, childhood memories, secret fears, dreams they'd buried beneath professional obligations. One August evening at Frank's Diner, after rescuing Madeline from a date with an heir to a shipping fortune, she asked the question Ethan had been dreading. "Why don't you date?" He looked up from his coffee. "What?" "I've known you for 3 years. I've never seen you with anyone. Never heard you mention a relationship. You're attractive, intelligent, kind." Madeline paused. "Why are you always available to rescue me on Saturday nights?" Ethan's throat tightened. This was dangerous territory. "I date," he said, the lie tasting bitter. "Just nothing serious." "Why not?" "Because I'm in love with you," he thought. "Because no one else exists when you're in the room. Because I've spent 3 years learning the exact way you take your coffee, and the expression you make when you're suppressing a yawn, and the sound of your laugh when something genuinely surprises you, and I can't imagine wanting to learn anyone else." "Haven't found the right person," he said instead. Madeline studied him with an intensity that made Ethan feel transparent. What would the right person be like? "Smart," Ethan said carefully. "Driven. Someone who's built something meaningful with their life. Someone who laughs at stupid jokes and gets passionate about things that matter. Someone who's kind even when it costs them something." "That sounds like a very specific person. I have specific taste." "And this person?" Madeline's voice was soft now, almost vulnerable. "Does she know how you feel?" Ethan's heart stopped. The question hung between them, loaded with implications he couldn't afford to explore. Outside, San Francisco was alive with Saturday night energy. People heading to bars, restaurants, lives full of simple possibilities that felt impossibly distant from this booth. "I don't think it matters," Ethan said finally. "Why not?" "Because some things can't work, even if you want them to, even if they'd be perfect." He met her eyes. "Sometimes the timing is wrong, or the circumstances. Sometimes caring about someone means letting them have the life they need, even if it doesn't include you." Madeline didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "That sounds lonely." "It is," Ethan admitted, "but it's better than the alternative." "Which is?" "Ruining something perfect by wanting more than it can give." They sat in silence. The diner's fluorescent lights hummed. A siren wailed past on the street outside. Ethan felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge. One more word, one more question, and everything would spill out. 3 years of careful control would shatter, and he'd tell her everything. That he loved her, that he'd always loved her, that every rescue was just an excuse to be near her, that he'd burn his career to ash if it meant she could be happy. But Madeline looked away first. "We should go," she said. "It's late." Relief and disappointment crashed through Ethan in equal measure. "Yeah, I'll walk you to your car." Outside, the August air was warm and thick. They walked in silence toward the parking garage where Madeline kept her Tesla. At her car, she turned to face him. "Ethan," she said, "whoever she is, she's an idiot if she doesn't see what's right in front of her." Before he could respond, Madeline kissed his cheek, soft, brief, and devastating. Then she was in her car, pulling away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the parking garage with the ghost of her lips on his skin and the certainty that he was the idiot she'd described. Bummed. September arrived with unseasonable rain and the knowledge that something had to break. The tension between them had become unsustainable. Every conversation felt weighted, every accidental touch burned. They were two people orbiting each other, held by gravity they couldn't acknowledge. Madeline's mother scheduled another date, this time with a senior partner at a prestigious law firm. Alexander something. Ethan didn't catch the last name. He just knew the pattern. Expensive restaurant, another suitable man, another evening of Madeline performing interests she didn't feel. But this time, when Madeline asked for a rescue, something in Ethan fractured. What if you just said no? He asked. They were in her office. It was Thursday afternoon. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the city into watercolor. Madeline looked up from her laptop. What? To your mother. To the date. What if you just said no? I've tried that. Have you? Ethan moved closer to her desk. Or have you said no and then given reasons she could argue with? What if you just said, I'm not going. I don't want to. That's reason enough. Madeline leaned back in her chair, studying him. Where is this coming from? I'm tired, Ethan said honestly. I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of inventing crises so you can escape situations you shouldn't be in to begin with. I'm tired of watching you shrink yourself to fit other people's expectations. I'm not shrinking. You are. The words came out harder than he intended. Every time you go on one of these dates to appease your mother, you're saying your wants matter less than her approval. Every time you let her dictate your personal life, you're agreeing that her vision matters more than yours. Madeline stood, and for the first time in 3 years, Ethan saw anger flash across her face. You think I don't know that? You think I enjoy being the disappointment daughter who can't manage to secure a husband despite having everything else? You're not a disappointment. To her, I am. No matter what I achieve, it's never enough. This company, these employees, the technology we've developed, none of it counts because I don't have the right man on my arm at charity galas. Madeline's voice rose. So, yes, I go on the stupid dates. I smile and pretend to be interested because it's easier than the alternative. Which is what? Being yourself? Being alone! The words exploded out of her. I am so tired of being alone, Ethan. I'm 34 years old. I work 18-hour days. I come home to an empty house. Everyone around me is building lives, marriages, families, connections that matter, and I have quarterly reports and board meetings and my mother's disappointment. You have me, Ethan said quietly. The silence that followed felt infinite. Madeline stared at him, something shifting in her expression, recognition, maybe, or fear. As my assistant, she said finally, carefully, as whatever you need. Ethan. She stepped around the desk, closing the distance between them. What are you saying? Everything, nothing, the truth he'd buried for 3 years. That he loved her. That he'd always loved her. That every rescue was just an excuse to be the person she turned to. That he knew it was impossible. The power dynamic, the professional boundary, the reality that she was his boss and he was her employee, and some lines existed for good reasons. But before he could form the words, his phone buzzed. Then hers. Then the office line lit up. Madeline glanced at her screen and closed her eyes. The date. He's at the restaurant. Mother's asking where I am. Tell her you're not coming, Ethan said. I can't just... Yes, you can. Text her right now. I'm not coming. I don't want to go. Please stop setting me up. Ethan pulled out his phone. I'll do it with you. We'll both send the messages, right now. Madeline looked at him, and in her eyes he saw 3 years of rescues and conversations and moments that meant everything and nothing. He saw her fear and her hope and her exhaustion. What if she never forgives me? Madeline whispered. Then she doesn't deserve you, Ethan said. But you deserve to stop living for her approval. For a long moment they stood there, Madeline with her phone in her hand, Ethan with his, the rain still falling outside, the office silent around them. Then Madeline started typing. Ethan watched her thumb move across the screen, watched her take a breath, steady herself, and hit send. Then she looked up at him, and her expression was equal parts terror and relief. I did it, she said. You did it. Madeline's phone rang immediately. Patricia Ross's name flashed on the screen. Madeline stared at it, then deliberately declined the call. Oh, God, she said, but she was smiling. She's going to kill me. Probably, Ethan agreed, but you'll survive. Will I? You built $1 billion company. You can handle your mother. Madeline laughed, a wild, slightly hysterical sound. Then she looked at Ethan, really looked at him, and something in the air between them changed, became electric, dangerous. Ethan, she said, when you said, I have you, what did you mean? This was it, the moment, the precipice. Ethan could step back, deflect, return them to the safe professional distance they'd maintained, or he could jump. "I meant," he began. His phone rang. Not a text, a call. From his car insurance company. Ethan stared at the screen, confusion cutting through the moment. "I'm sorry, I need to—" "Answer it," Madeline said. "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. Because the person on the other end told him his car had been in an accident, a hit and run in the parking garage, significant damage, undrivable. Ethan would need to file a report, arrange a tow, deal with repairs. "When did this happen?" Ethan asked, his mind racing. Security footage shows approximately 45 minutes ago. When he and Madeline had been in her office, when he'd been so close to finally telling her the truth, when everything had been balanced on the edge of transformation. Ethan ended the call, looked at Madeline, saw his reflection in her eyes, always present, always reliable, always there. Except tomorrow. When she had another date. When her mother would push harder, angry about today's defiance. When Madeline would need rescue again, and Ethan's car would be in the shop, and for the first time in 3 years, he wouldn't be able to save her. "Car trouble?" Madeline asked. "Someone hit it in the garage. It's bad." Understanding dawned in her expression. Tomorrow was Saturday. The date was still scheduled. Patricia Ross had already texted Madeline 3 times, insisting, demanding, guilting. "I'll figure something out," Madeline said. "You've done enough." But they both knew she wouldn't. She'd go to the date because saying no once was hard enough. She'd suffer through another evening of performing interest she didn't feel. And Ethan wouldn't be there to rescue her because his car was totaled and the universe apparently had a sick sense of timing. "I should go deal with this," Ethan said, gesturing vaguely toward the window, the garage, the wreckage below. "Yeah." Madeline's voice was small. "I should probably prepare for whatever Mother's planning next." They stood there, the moment from before irretrievably lost. All the words Ethan had almost said felt impossible now. The rain kept falling, the city kept moving, and the distance between them, briefly closed, stretched back to its careful professional width. "See you Monday?" Madeline asked. "Monday," Ethan confirmed. He left her office, took the elevator down to the parking garage, and stared at his car. Side mirror destroyed, door dented, definitely not drivable. He pulled out his phone, started making the necessary calls, and felt the weight of 3 years of almost pressing down on his chest. Tomorrow, Madeline would go on her date. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be there to save her. Tomorrow, everything would change. He just didn't know how much. The morning arrived cold and gray, fog rolling in from the bay like a physical presence. Ethan stood in his apartment, staring at his phone, knowing what he should do and completely unable to do it. Madeline's date was at 7. Some new restaurant in Pacific Heights her mother had specifically chosen. Intimate lighting, carefully curated wine list. The kind of place designed for exactly this sort of arranged introduction. Alexander Whitmore, senior partner at Whitmore & Associates, heir to old San Francisco money, and according to Patricia Ross's enthusiastic texts, finally, someone suitable. Ethan's car sat in a repair shop across town, waiting for parts that wouldn't arrive until Wednesday. He'd called every rental agency within 20 miles. Nothing available on a Saturday without a reservation. Ride-sharing would work, but the timing would be impossible. He'd have to leave now to stage the rescue properly, to be convincingly present at the office when he called with the emergency. His phone buzzed. A text from Madeline. "Mother's already called twice. This is going to be brutal." Ethan typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "You don't have to go. We both know I do. Yesterday's rebellion bought me exactly 1 day of peace. If I cancel tonight, it'll be worse. Then I'll figure something out." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Your car is destroyed, Ethan. It's okay. I'll survive 1 dinner." But that was the problem. It wasn't about surviving. It was about the slow erosion of self that came from repeatedly performing interests she didn't feel, from shrinking herself to fit someone else's vision, from spending evening after evening with men who saw her as an acquisition rather than a person. Ethan looked around his apartment, the modest 1-bedroom in the Sunset District that cost half his salary, the mismatched furniture accumulated over years, the life he'd built in the margins of loving someone he couldn't have. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. If he couldn't drive to her rescue, he'd find another way. The office felt different on Saturday mornings. Empty, echoing, full of the week's ghost conversations. Ethan let himself in with his key card, made coffee in the break room out of habit, and sat at his desk staring at his computer screen. He could craft the emergency from here. System failure, client crisis, some disaster that required Madeline's immediate attention. She'd see through it. After 3 years, she always knew when he was lying for her benefit, but she'd use the excuse anyway. Patricia Ross would be furious. Alexander Whitmore would be insulted, and Monday morning would bring consequences Ethan couldn't predict. But Madeline would be free. For one more night, she'd be free. Ethan was composing the text when his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Ethan Cole. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Speaking. This is Patricia Ross. Ethan's blood went cold. In 3 years of rescue operations, Madeline's mother had never called him directly. The fact that she had his personal number was alarming enough. The reason she was calling was worse. Mrs. Ross, he said carefully, how can I help you? You can stop interfering with my daughter's life. No preamble, no politeness, just direct accusation. I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends today. I'm not sure what you mean. Don't insult my intelligence. Every time Madeline has a date, every single time, there's suddenly a work emergency, server crashes, client disasters, problems that somehow only she can solve. Patricia's voice was sharp as glass. And every time, you're the one who calls her away. Ethan said nothing. His mind raced through responses, denials, deflections. I had it check the company logs, Patricia continued. Funny thing, none of these emergencies actually happened. No server issues, no client crises, just convenient lies that my daughter used to escape perfectly appropriate social engagements. With respect, Mrs. Ross, what Madeline does with her personal time is being manipulated by an assistant who's clearly infatuated with her. The words hit like a physical blow. Did you think I wouldn't notice? The way you look at her, the way you've positioned yourself as her rescuer, her confidant, her emotional support. I support her because that's my job. Your job is to manage her calendar and handle correspondence. Your job is not to sabotage her relationships or feed her delusions that she can avoid adult responsibilities indefinitely. Ethan felt anger rising, hot and defensive. Adult responsibilities? You mean arranged dates with men who bore her? Men who don't know her, don't understand her, and see her as a trophy to acquire? I see I've hit a nerve. Patricia's tone shifted, became almost amused. You're in love with her. That's not... Please. I've been navigating social dynamics since before you were born. I know infatuation when I see it. A pause. And I know it's pathetic. The word landed like a slap. Ethan gripped his phone, forcing his voice to stay level. Is there a point to this call? The point is that tonight, Madeline will attend dinner with Alexander Whitmore without interruption. No fake emergencies, no dramatic rescues. You will not contact her. You will not manufacture crises, and you will not interfere. Patricia's voice hardened. If you do, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never work in this industry again. I have connections throughout San Francisco. One word from me, and you'll be unemployable. You can't? I absolutely can. So here's what's going to happen. Madeline will go on this date. She'll give Alexander a genuine chance. And you will stay home and reconsider your very inappropriate attachment to your employer. The line went dead. Ethan sat in the silent office, phone still pressed to his ear, Patricia Ross's words echoing in his head. Pathetic, infatuated, inappropriate, each one true in ways that made his chest ache. He looked at his computer screen, at the fabricated emergency he'd been preparing. The lie that would save Madeline from one more terrible evening but confirm everything her mother suspected. The rescue that would prove he was exactly what Patricia had called him, an assistant in love with his boss, unable to maintain professional boundaries, willing to sabotage her life for his own emotional satisfaction. Except it wasn't sabotage. It was protection. It was giving Madeline the choice her mother refused to allow. It was... His phone buzzed. Madeline. Are you at the office? Ethan stared at the message. He could lie, say he was home. He could tell the truth and watch her hope deflate. He could ignore it entirely and let the silence speak for itself. Yeah, he typed. Working on some things? On a Saturday morning? You're insane. Says the woman who works until midnight most weeknights. Fair point. A pause, then, thank you for yesterday, for telling me to say no, even though it lasted approximately 12 hours before she started in again. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He could tell her about Patricia's call, the threats, the way her mother had dissected his feelings with surgical precision. He could warn her that tonight's date came with consequences far beyond one uncomfortable dinner. Instead, he wrote, "You deserve to say no. You still do. But I won't, because that's who I am, apparently. The daughter who caves. You're not caving. You're choosing your battles." That's a generous interpretation. It's the true one. Another pause, longer this time. Then, "I wish you could be there tonight. Not to rescue me, just to be there." Does that make sense? Ethan closed his eyes. It made perfect sense. It made heartbreaking, impossible, devastating sense. "It makes sense," he replied. "I should go. Mother's calling. Again. I'll see you Monday?" "Monday," Ethan confirmed and set his phone down on his desk. He sat there for a long time, surrounded by the empty office, the unfinished emergency still glowing on his screen. Patricia Ross had made the situation clear. Interfere tonight, and his career was over. Stay silent, and Madeline would endure another evening of performing for her mother's approval. The choice should have been simple. Professional survival versus emotional satisfaction. Job security versus one more rescue. But Ethan had never been good at choosing himself over Madeline's happiness. He deleted the fake emergency, closed his laptop, and made a decision that would change everything. The restaurant was called Celestine, tucked into a quiet block in Pacific Heights, where old money whispered rather than shouted. Ethan arrived at 6:30, dressed in the one suit he owned that didn't scream assistant. Charcoal gray, well-fitted, purchased for his sister's wedding 2 years ago and rarely worn since. He didn't have a plan. Not really. Just a bone-deep certainty that Madeline shouldn't have to face this evening alone, and a reckless disregard for the consequences Patricia Ross had threatened. The host greeted him with professional warmth. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting someone," Ethan said. "Alexander Whitmore's party?" The host checked his tablet. "Ah, yes. Mr. Whitmore requested our private corner. However, I show only 2 guests on the reservation." "Late addition," Ethan said smoothly. "Business associate. Mr. Whitmore's expecting me." It was a gamble, counting on the host's desire to avoid confrontation, on the ambiguity of business dinners, on his own confidence selling the lie. The host hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. Right this way." The restaurant was exactly what Ethan expected. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, the kind of studied casual elegance that cost a fortune to achieve. The host led him through the main dining room toward a secluded corner where Ethan could see 2 figures seated at a table by the window. Madeline wore navy blue, her hair swept up, expression politely attentive in the way Ethan recognized as her performing face. Across from her sat a man in his early 40s, handsome in a conventional way, well-dressed, gesturing with the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. Alexander Whitmore, Ethan presumed, looking exactly like the kind of man Patricia Ross would choose, successful, suitable, and completely wrong for her daughter. Ethan's heart hammered. This was insane. Crashing a date, confronting Madeline's companion, risking everything Patricia had threatened. But he'd spent 3 years watching Madeline diminish herself for other people's comfort. Tonight, that ended. He walked toward their table. Madeline saw him first. Her expression cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been hope before settling on carefully neutral. "Ethan?" Alexander looked up, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption. "I'm sorry, do we know you?" "Ethan Cole," he said, extending his hand with more confidence than he felt. "I work with Ms. Ross. I apologize for interrupting, but we have a situation that requires immediate attention." "A situation?" Alexander's tone suggested he'd heard this excuse before. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that can't wait until Monday." Ethan looked at Madeline. "I need 5 minutes. It's urgent." Madeline stared at him. In her eyes, he saw the question. "What are you doing?" and beneath it the answer she'd already guessed. Rescuing you. One more time. I'm in the middle of dinner, she said slowly. I understand, but this genuinely can't wait. Ms. Ross, Alexander interjected, his voice hardening, if your company has such poor boundaries that employees feel entitled to interrupt your personal time, perhaps you need to establish better management structures. The condescension in his tone made Ethan's jaw clench, but before he could respond, Madeline stood. Excuse me, Alexander. I'll be just a moment. She walked past Ethan toward the restaurant's entrance, moving with the rigid control of someone barely containing fury. Ethan followed, acutely aware of Alexander's glare burning into his back. Outside, the evening air was cool, fog rolling between buildings. Madeline turned on him the moment the door closed. What the hell are you doing here? Rescuing you. I didn't ask to be rescued. Her voice was sharp, but underneath Ethan heard something else. Fear, maybe, or desperation. You don't have a car. You're not supposed to be here. How did you even… I took a rideshare. I walked the last 6 blocks. I lied to the host. Ethan stepped closer. And before you ask why, I'll tell you. Because you shouldn't have to do this alone. It's one dinner, Ethan. It's not, though. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's every time you smile at someone who bores you, every time you pretend to be interested in conversations that make you want to scream, every time you shrink yourself to fit into the shape your mother wants. He was talking too fast, saying too much, but 3 years of restraint had finally snapped. You're brilliant and funny and built something extraordinary from nothing, and you deserve better than men who talk at you instead of with you. Madeline stared at him. You can't keep doing this. Why not? Because it's not sustainable. Because eventually people notice. Because… She stopped abruptly, something shifting in her expression. My mother called you, didn't she? Ethan said nothing, which was answer enough. What did she say? Madeline's voice went quiet. That I was interfering, that I needed to stop, that if I ruined tonight's date, she'd make sure I never worked again. And you came anyway. It wasn't a question. I came anyway. Why? The word came out barely above a whisper. Why would you risk that? Because I love you, Ethan thought. Because I've loved you since the second week of working together, when you stayed up all night fixing a problem that wasn't your fault, just so your team wouldn't take the blame. Because your happiness matters more to me than my career, my reputation, or my own self-preservation. Because you called me insane for working on a Saturday, he said instead, and then planned to spend your evening with someone who thinks women need better management structures. Madeline's laugh was sharp and sudden. He really said that. He really did. He also spent the first 20 minutes explaining how impressive his client list is. Apparently representing Fortune 500 companies makes him very important. She looked back toward the restaurant. I was already planning my escape route when you walked in. Then let me give you one. Ethan, one more rescue. That's all I'm asking. Let me save you from this terrible dinner, and then we can have a serious conversation about boundaries and professional conduct and whatever else needs to be addressed. He held out his hand. Please. Madeline looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Behind her, through the restaurant's window, Ethan could see Alexander checking his watch with visible impatience. If I walk away right now, Madeline said slowly, Mother will be furious. She'll call it disrespectful, immature, unprofessional. She'll probably threaten to pull her investment from the company. Can she do that? She owns 3%. It would be more symbolic than financially damaging, but yes. And if you stay, I'll spend 2 hours pretending to be fascinated by legal precedents and Alexander's golf handicap. I'll go home feeling hollow, and Monday morning I'll wake up and do it all over again because that's what's expected. Madeline met his eyes. That's my life, Ethan. This is what I signed up for when I took Mother's money to start the company. Her investment came with strings attached. Then cut the strings. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You're 34 years old and running a billion-dollar company. You don't need her approval or her investment or her permission to live your life. Ethan was aware he was pushing too hard, crossing too many lines, but he'd come this far. What you need is to stop letting her fear dictate your choices. Her fear? She's terrified you'll end up alone, so she controls who you date, who you meet, who gets access to you. Because if she chooses, if she manages every interaction, she can ensure you don't make the mistakes she thinks she made. Ethan softened his voice. But you're not her, and her fear isn't your responsibility. Madeline's eyes were bright, maybe with tears, maybe with anger. You don't know anything about my relationship with my mother. I know you delete her calls before answering. I know you tense up every time she texts. I know you spend more time dreading her judgment than enjoying her company. He paused. And I know she called me pathetic today for caring about you. The words hung between them. Madeline's expression shifted, shock, then fury. She said what? That I was pathetic, infatuated, inappropriate. Ethan shrugged, trying for casual and landing somewhere near broken. She's not wrong. Ethan, it's fine. She saw through me. I'm not exactly subtle. You're subtle enough that Madeline stopped, seemed to recalibrate. What exactly did she say? That I was in love with you, that I was sabotaging your relationships, that I needed to stay away from tonight's date or she'd destroy my career. And you came anyway, Madeline repeated. I came anyway. You absolute idiot. But she was smiling now, tentative and real. You're going to lose everything because of me. I lost everything 3 years ago when I fell in love with my boss, Ethan said. Everything since has just been details. The confession settled between them like snow, soft, inevitable, transforming the landscape completely. Madeline stared at him, and Ethan watched her process the words, absorb their meaning, understand what he'd finally admitted. 3 years? She asked finally. Give or take, the exact moment's a little blurry. And you never said anything. You're my boss. There's a power dynamic. It would have been inappropriate. Ethan laughed, the sound bitter. Your mother was right about that part. Stop. Madeline stepped closer, eliminating the distance between them. Stop letting her voice matter more than yours. Stop deciding what I can and can't handle. I wasn't. You were. You've been protecting me from your feelings for 3 years while orchestrating elaborate rescues from bad dates. You've been loving me from a distance because you decided it was inappropriate, without ever asking what I wanted. Ethan's heart was hammering so hard he could barely hear over it. What do you want? I want you to stop apologizing for caring. I want you to stop treating me like I'm made of glass. Madeline's voice dropped lower. And I want you to understand that I've been in love with you for at least 2 of those 3 years. The world stopped. Ethan stared at her, certain he'd misheard, certain this was some stress-induced hallucination. What? I'm in love with you. Madeline said it clearly, deliberately. I have been for a long time. I just didn't think... She stopped, steadied herself. You're my employee. I'm your boss. I convinced myself it was impossible, that even if you felt something, acting on it would be wrong. That's what I thought. We're both idiots then. Apparently. They stood there on the sidewalk outside Celestine, fog curling around them, the city moving past in blurs of light and sound. Inside the restaurant, Alexander Whitmore was probably checking his watch again, growing more irritated by the second. Patricia Ross was probably already composing her furious phone call. Monday morning would bring consequences neither of them could fully predict. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered. So what do we do? Ethan asked. I don't know. Madeline's laugh was shaky. This is where you usually have a plan. Some elaborate emergency that explains everything. I'm out of emergencies. All I have is the truth, which is that I love you, that I've loved you for 3 years, that I will probably keep loving you even if it costs me everything. Ethan reached for her hand, tentative, testing. And that I'm done lying about it. Madeline's fingers closed around his. Her hand was warm, solid, real. I need to go back in there, she said. I need to end this properly. To tell Alexander I'm not interested and face whatever conversation needs to happen. Okay? And then I need to call my mother and have the fight we've been avoiding for a decade. I can wait. No. Madeline squeezed his hand. Come with me. Not as my assistant, not as my rescuer, just as someone who loves me and refuses to let me face this alone. Your mother will murder us both. Probably, Madeline smiled, but at least we'll die honest. They walked back into Celestine together, hand in hand, and Ethan felt the weight of 3 years of pretending finally lift from his chest. Alexander saw them approaching and stood, his expression darkening. "Everything resolved?" he asked coldly. "Actually, yes." Madeline's voice was steady. "Alexander, I apologize for the interruption and for wasting your evening, but I need to be honest with you. I'm not interested in pursuing this relationship." "Because of him?" Alexander gestured toward Ethan with visible disgust. "Because I'm already in a relationship with him." The lie, or maybe the truth, Ethan wasn't sure anymore, hung in the air. Alexander's face flushed red. "Does your mother know about this?" "She's about to." Madeline released Ethan's hand and pulled out her phone. "If you'll excuse us." She walked away before Alexander could respond. Ethan followed, leaving the lawyer standing alone at the table with 2 untouched wine glasses and the wreckage of Patricia Ross's latest matchmaking attempt. Outside again, Madeline was already dialing. She put the phone on speaker. Patricia answered on the second ring. "Darling, how's dinner?" Alexander texted that there was some confusion. "There's no confusion, Mother. I'm leaving." A pause. "Leaving? But you haven't even ordered entrees." "I'm leaving because I'm not interested in Alexander. I'm not interested in any of the men you've set me up with. And I'm not going to keep pretending otherwise to make you comfortable." "Madeline," Patricia's voice hardened. "We discussed this. You made a commitment. No, you made a commitment to fixing me, managing me, controlling every aspect of my personal life because you're terrified I'll end up alone." Madeline's voice shook slightly but held firm. "But I'm not alone. I'm in a relationship. With Ethan." Silence. Then, "Your assistant." "Yes." "The man I specifically told to stay away from you tonight." "Yes." "The man who's been sabotaging every relationship I've tried to facilitate for 3 years." "He hasn't been sabotaging anything. He's been giving me the choice you refuse to allow, the choice to walk away from situations that make me miserable." "And you think this is better?" Patricia's laugh was sharp. "Throwing away your reputation, your social standing, your prospects for an assistant?" "I think," Madeline said carefully, "that I'd rather be happy with someone inappropriate than miserable with someone suitable." "You're making a mistake." "Probably. But it's my mistake to make." Another pause, longer this time. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had shifted. Not softer exactly, but more honest. "I'm only trying to protect you." "I know. But I don't need protection. I need space to make my own choices, even the wrong ones. And if this ends badly, then it ends badly, and I'll survive because I've survived everything else." Madeline looked at Ethan. "But I don't think it will." Patricia was quiet for so long Ethan thought she'd hung up. Then, "Bring him to brunch next Sunday. I want to meet him properly." Madeline blinked. "What?" "If you're serious about this, I want to understand why. And if he's serious about you, he can face me over Eggs Benedict." "Mother." "Next Sunday, 11 o'clock, the club." Patricia's tone brooked no argument. "Don't be late." The line went dead. Madeline stared at her phone. "Did that just happen?" "I think your mother just invited me to brunch," Ethan said slowly. "She's going to destroy you." "Probably." He pulled her close, feeling her warmth against him, solid and real, and finally impossibly his. "But I've gotten pretty good at impossible situations." Madeline laughed against his chest. 3 years of practice. 3 years of loving you. Ethan pulled back enough to see her face. "So what happens now?" "Now we figure out how to do this properly. The company needs to know. HR needs documentation. We need to address the power dynamic." She stopped at his expression. "What?" "You're already planning, making lists, preparing for Monday. That's what I do." "I know." Ethan kissed her forehead. "But maybe tonight we could just be 2 people who finally admitted they're in love. The logistics can wait until Monday." Madeline considered, then nodded. "Frank's Diner?" "Where else?" They walked through the foggy streets toward the diner that had been their refuge for 3 years, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Relief, maybe. Or freedom. The weight of secrets finally lifted, replaced by the lighter, more dangerous weight of hope. At Frank's, the same tired waitress greeted them with recognition. They slid into their usual booth, the one by the window where they'd spent dozens of late nights talking about everything except what mattered most. "So," Madeline said once they'd ordered coffee. 3 years, give or take. "When did you know?" Ethan thought back. "There was this day, maybe 2 months after I started. You were fighting with the board about expansion funding. Everyone said it was too risky, too fast. But you had this vision, this absolute certainty about where the company needed to go." He smiled at the memory. "Afterward, you came to my desk and said, 'Did I just make the biggest mistake of my career?' And I said, 'Probably, but it's going to be brilliant.'" "I remember that." Madeline's voice was soft. "You laughed, this real, genuine laugh, not the professional one you use in meetings. And I thought I could listen to that sound for the rest of my life." Ethan shrugged. "That's when I knew." "That's earlier than I thought." "When did you know?" Madeline was quiet for a moment, tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "The night we came here after my father's funeral. Remember?" Ethan nodded. It had been 18 months ago. Madeline's father had died suddenly, heart attack at 63, and she'd insisted on working through her grief until Ethan physically removed her laptop and drove her to Frank's at midnight. "I was trying so hard to hold it together," Madeline continued. "Everyone at the funeral kept telling me how strong I was, how proud my father would be. And I just wanted to scream that I wasn't strong, I was broken, and being proud wasn't going to bring him back." She looked up. "But then we were here, and you didn't say anything. You just sat with me while I cried into terrible coffee. And when I finally stopped, you said, 'That grief isn't weakness,'" Ethan finished quietly. "That loving someone enough to break when they're gone is the most human thing we do. You stayed with me until 4 in the morning. You drove me home. You made sure I ate breakfast before you left." Madeline's eyes were bright. "And I remember thinking, this is what love looks like. Not flowers or grand gestures, just someone willing to sit in your pain without trying to fix it." "I wanted to fix it," Ethan admitted. "I just knew I couldn't. That's why it mattered." They sat in silence, the diner humming around them. Outside, San Francisco sparkled through the fog, millions of lives intersecting, diverging, finding each other in the vast complexity of existence. Somewhere in the city, Alexander Whitmore was probably calling Patricia Ross with outrage. Patricia was probably already planning her assault on Ethan's character. Monday morning would bring HR meetings, difficult conversations, and consequences neither of them could fully predict. But tonight, they had this: honesty, coffee, and the terrifying freedom of finally telling the truth. "I'm scared," Madeline said suddenly. "Of what?" "That this will ruin everything. The company, our working relationship, what we already have." She met his eyes. "We've built something important together, professionally, I mean. What if adding romance destroys it?" "What if it doesn't?" Ethan countered. "What if we're better together than apart?" "That's optimistic." "I've spent 3 years loving you from a distance. I'm feeling optimistic." Madeline laughed, but it faded quickly. "I'm serious, Ethan. There are real complications. The power dynamic, company policy, what people will think, so we'll address them. I'll transfer departments or report to someone else. We'll be transparent with HR. We'll navigate it together." He reached across the table, took her hand. "But we'll do it as partners, not as boss and assistant, not as CEO and employee, as equals. Is that possible?" "I don't know, but I'd like to try." Madeline squeezed his hand. "Monday's going to be a disaster. Probably. My mother is going to make your life hell. Almost certainly. And half the office is going to gossip about us for months. Definitely. But you still want to do this?" Ethan looked at her, really looked. At the woman who'd built an empire while battling her mother's expectations. At the CEO who stayed late to make sure her employees felt valued. At the person who laughed at his terrible jokes and cried during sad movies and spent 3 years hiding her feelings because she thought love was inappropriate. I want to do this, he said firmly. Not despite the complications, because of you, because loving you is worth every difficult conversation, every HR meeting, every brunch with your terrifying mother. She is terrifying. Absolutely. But you'll still come to brunch? I'll be there. Ethan smiled. Someone needs to rescue you from the Eggs Benedict. Madeline laughed, and the sound filled the diner, familiar and new all at once. They stayed until the coffee went cold and the waitress started giving them pointed looks. Then they walked back out into the fog, hand in hand, toward whatever complicated, messy, beautiful future waited for them. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Ethan stood outside Vanguard Technologies at 7:30, watching early employees filter through the glass doors, and tried to prepare himself for what was coming. His phone had been silent all weekend. No calls from Patricia Ross, no angry messages from Alexander Whitmore, no indication of the storm that was surely gathering. The quiet felt ominous. Madeline had texted him once on Sunday evening. Still want to do this? He'd replied immediately, yes, good, because I already scheduled the HR meeting for 8 a.m. Now, standing in the cool morning air with commuters rushing past, Ethan wondered if they were making a catastrophic mistake. Not about being together, that felt more right than anything in his life, but about doing it this way, this publicly, with this much at stake. His phone buzzed. Madeline. I'm in my office. Come up when you're ready. Ethan took a breath and walked inside. The elevator ride felt eternal. He'd made this journey thousands of times over 3 years, but today everything was different. Today he wasn't Madeline's assistant coming to review her schedule. He was the man who loved her, who'd crashed her date, who was about to upend both their professional lives. When he reached her floor, he found Madeline standing by the windows, backlit by the San Francisco skyline. She wore charcoal gray, professional armor, but when she turned and saw him, her expression softened into something vulnerable and real. You came, she said. Did you think I wouldn't? Part of me wondered if you'd wake up Sunday morning and realize this was insane. She moved toward him, stopping just close enough that he could smell her perfume. We could still walk it back. Tell HR it was a misunderstanding. Go back to how things were. Is that what you want? No. The answer came fast, certain. But I needed to know you had the choice. Ethan reached for her hand, weaving their fingers together. I choose this. I choose you, even if it's complicated. It's definitely complicated. But Madeline was smiling now. Jennifer from HR is going to have a field day with us. Jennifer's been managing office relationships for 15 years. She's seen worse. Have you met us? We're pretty bad. Fair point. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, both knowing that once they walked into that HR meeting, everything would change. No more plausible deniability, no more careful distance. Just the truth, messy and exposed and terrifying. Together? Madeline asked. Together, Ethan confirmed. Jennifer Martinez had an office on the 3rd floor that somehow managed to be both welcoming and intimidating. Framed certifications lined one wall. A small water feature burbled in the corner. The woman herself sat behind a massive desk, wearing reading glasses and an expression that suggested she'd already anticipated this conversation. Madeline? Ethan, please, sit. Jennifer gestured to the chairs across from her. I appreciate you coming in early. This is the kind of discussion that benefits from privacy. They sat. Ethan's heart was hammering, but Madeline's hand found his beneath the desk's edge, steadying him. I'll be direct, Jennifer said, folding her hands. You're here to disclose a romantic relationship, correct? Yes, Madeline answered. Ethan and I are involved. As of Saturday night, officially. Though feelings have existed longer than that. How much longer? Madeline glanced at Ethan. He squeezed her hand and spoke. On my end, approximately 3 years. I've never acted on those feelings until now. Everything prior was professional. And on your end, Madeline? 2 years, give or take. Same situation, nothing acted upon until we both acknowledged our feelings this weekend. Jennifer made notes on her tablet. Ethan, you're currently Madeline's direct report, executive assistant, correct? Correct. That creates an inherent power imbalance. Company policy requires that romantic relationships between supervisors and direct reports be disclosed immediately and addressed through departmental transfer or reporting structure changes. Jennifer looked up. Were you aware of this policy? I was, Ethan said. That's part of why I never said anything. The professional boundary felt necessary. Until Saturday, Jennifer observed. Until Saturday, Ethan agreed. When I realized that maintaining professional boundaries was costing us both something more important than career advancement. Which was? Honesty, connection, the possibility of building something real together. Jennifer studied him for a long moment, then turned to Madeline. As CEO, you understand that this puts the company in a difficult position. There will be questions about favoritism, about whether this relationship influenced business decisions, about the optics of a female executive dating her male subordinate. I understand, Madeline said quietly. And I'm prepared to address those questions transparently. Ethan has never received preferential treatment. Every raise, every bonus, every assignment has been based on merit and documented appropriately. I've reviewed his file already, Jennifer said. His performance reviews are exemplary, no red flags that suggest favoritism. She paused. Though I'm curious about the pattern of weekend emergencies over the past year. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Madeline's hand tightened around his. The emergencies, Jennifer continued, where you, Ethan, would contact Madeline about urgent business matters that required her immediate return to the office, matters that, according to IT logs, never actually existed. Those were personal, Madeline said carefully, not business-related. Ethan was helping me navigate difficult family situations. By creating fake corporate crises? By giving me acceptable reasons to leave social obligations I didn't want to attend. Madeline's voice was steady. My mother has been arranging dates for me for years. Ethan provided me with excuses to leave when those situations became uncomfortable. It was inappropriate use of company resources, and I take full responsibility. And you, Ethan? You participated in this deception willingly? I did, Ethan said, because Madeline's well-being mattered more to me than policy compliance. If that's grounds for termination, I understand. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Romantic, if wildly inappropriate. She set down her tablet. Here's where we are. Vanguard has clear policies about workplace relationships, but we're also realistic about human nature. People fall in love. It happens. What matters is how we handle it moving forward. What do you recommend? Madeline asked. Ethan needs to transfer out of your direct supervision immediately. We have several departments that could use someone with his skills, operations, business development, even special projects reporting directly to the board. Jennifer looked at Ethan. Any preferences? Whatever makes sense for the company, Ethan said. I don't want to cause disruption. Too late for that, Jennifer said dryly. The disruption already exists, now we manage it. She turned back to Madeline. You'll need to be prepared for gossip. Some employees will be supportive. Others will speculate about whether this relationship influenced past decisions. You'll face questions about judgment, professionalism, the example you're setting as CEO. I know, Madeline said, and I'm ready to address those concerns honestly. Good, because transparency is your best defense here. Jennifer pulled up something on her computer. I'll draft the internal announcement. Simple, direct, professional. Madeline Ross and Ethan Cole have disclosed a personal relationship and will be restructuring their professional reporting relationship in accordance with company policy. Nothing dramatic, just facts. When will it go out? Ethan asked. This afternoon. Better to control the narrative than let rumors spread. Jennifer looked between them. Any questions? Just one, Madeline said. Are we going to survive this? Professionally, I mean. Jennifer's expression softened. Madeline, you built this company from nothing. You've weathered market crashes, product failures, and board rebellions. A workplace relationship is hardly your biggest challenge. She paused. Though, I'll be honest, the next few weeks will be uncomfortable. People will judge. Some will question your authority. But if you handle it with grace and transparency, you'll be fine. They left Jennifer's office 30 minutes later with a transfer plan, a a communication strategy, and the unsettling knowledge that their private relationship was about to become very public information. "That went better than expected," Madeline said as they walked toward the elevator. "She didn't fire me. That's something." "She couldn't fire you. You're too valuable." Madeline hit the elevator button. "Though the fake emergencies thing was awkward. I thought she was going to murder us when she mentioned the IT logs." "Me too." The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside alone for the moment. "So, operations, business development, or special projects? What do you think?" "I think," Madeline said slowly, "that special projects would let you work on interesting challenges without direct supervision. You'd report to James and the board, more autonomy, more visibility. Also more distance from you. Professionally, yes. Personally?" She moved closer. "We'll figure it out." The elevator reached the executive floor. Before the doors opened, Madeline kissed him. Quick, soft, a promise sealed in stolen privacy. "For luck," she said. The doors opened to reveal Sarah from finance standing in the hallway, eyes wide with shock. "Oh," Sarah said, I was just—" "It's fine, Sarah." Madeline's voice was calm, professional. "Actually, you'll be hearing an announcement this afternoon. Ethan and I are in a relationship. We've disclosed it to HR and are restructuring our professional reporting relationship accordingly." Sarah's expression cycled through surprise, curiosity, and something that might have been delight. "That's... wow, congratulations?" "Thank you," Madeline said simply. "Does this mean the emergency server crashes were—" "We'll address everything in the announcement," Madeline interrupted gently. "Right now, I need to prepare for the board call. Ethan, can we sync later about transition planning?" "Of course." They separated. Madeline to her office, Ethan to his desk, Sarah presumably to spread the news faster than any official announcement could manage. Ethan sat down and stared at his computer screen, trying to process the fact that his carefully constructed professional life had just been dismantled in the span of 2 hours. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus in development. "Dude, did you actually crash Madeline's date Saturday night?" Then another from Lisa in marketing. "I heard you're dating the CEO. Please tell me that's not just gossip." And another from Tom in operations. "If the server crash rescues were fake, that's actually genius. Respect." The news was spreading. Within minutes, Ethan's phone was lighting up with messages. Some congratulatory, some curious, some judging. He turned off notifications and focused on his email, trying to ignore the way his chest felt tight with anxiety. A knock on his cubicle. He looked up to find James Chen, the CFO, standing there with an expression that was difficult to read. "Walk with me," James said. It wasn't a request. Ethan stood and followed James down the hallway, through the break room, out onto the small balcony that overlooked the city. They stood in silence for a moment, watching fog roll through the financial district. "I warned you," James said finally, "about lines, about taking things lightly. You did. And you crossed the line anyway." "I did." James turned to face him. "Why?" Ethan considered lying, deflecting, giving some professional answer about personal growth and life choices. But James deserved honesty. "Because I'm in love with her," Ethan said simply, "and pretending otherwise was killing me slowly. I thought I could manage it, maintain professional distance, keep my feelings contained, be satisfied with what we already had. But Saturday night, I realized that surviving isn't the same as living." That's very poetic," James said dryly. "Also potentially career suicide." "I know." Madeline's under enormous pressure. The board already questioned some of her decisions. Her mother has influence with several major investors. Adding a workplace romance to the mix gives her critics ammunition. "I know that too." "And you're willing to be that ammunition?" "I'm willing to love her," Ethan corrected. "If that becomes ammunition, we'll deal with it together." James was quiet for a long moment, studying Ethan with the intensity of someone who'd spent decades reading people for a living. Finally, he nodded. "Jennifer suggested you for special projects, reporting directly to me and the board." "She mentioned that." "It's a good position, More responsibility, better visibility, potential fast track to director level. James paused. But it also means you'll be in board meetings, presenting to investors, representing the company at high-level discussions. Can you handle that while navigating a relationship with the CEO? I can handle it, Ethan said firmly. I've been handling it for 3 years while hiding my feelings. Doing it honestly will be easier. We'll see. James pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. You start Wednesday. That gives you tomorrow to transition your current responsibilities. Sarah can cover most of your executive assistant duties until we hire a replacement. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Special projects is where we send the high-potential people who need to prove themselves under pressure. You'll be managing crisis situations, sensitive negotiations, problems no one else wants to touch. James met his eyes. I'm giving you this opportunity because I believe in your capability, not because of your relationship with Madeline. Don't make me regret it. I won't. James nodded and walked away, leaving Ethan alone on the balcony with the weight of new responsibility and the lingering question of whether he'd just made the best or worst decision of his career. The afternoon brought Jennifer's promised announcement, professional, brief, exactly as she'd described. Within minutes, the office was buzzing with reaction. Ethan's phone exploded with messages again, some supportive, some skeptical, some asking invasive questions he had no intention of answering. He was organizing files for his transition when Madeline appeared at his desk. My office, now. Her tone was clipped, professional, the voice she used in board meetings. Ethan's stomach dropped. He followed her down the hallway, acutely aware of eyes tracking their movement. Inside her office, Madeline closed the door and leaned against it. My mother called, she said. Already? Apparently, Alexander Whitmore contacted her Sunday evening. He was very detailed about Saturday's disruption, very offended, very eager to share his perspective on my poor judgment. Madeline's laugh was sharp. Mother called me incompetent, said I was throwing away my reputation for an infatuation, said she was ashamed. Madeline, she also pulled her investment, 3%, gone, effective immediately. Madeline's voice was eerily calm. She's telling everyone in her social circle that I've lost perspective, that I'm having some kind of crisis, that the company is clearly suffering under my leadership if I'm making such poor personal decisions. Ethan felt his chest tighten. I'm sorry. Don't be. I expected this. Madeline moved away from the door, sat on the edge of her desk. What I didn't expect was how liberating it would feel. Liberating? She pulled her investment, the thing she's held over my head for years, the leverage, the control, the reminder that I needed her money to start this company. Madeline looked at him, and her eyes were bright but clear. She's gone, and we're still here, still functioning, still building something that matters. 3% could still hurt. It could. Or it could be the best thing that ever happened to us. Madeline stood, moved closer. For the first time in my life, I don't owe her anything. No more arranged dates. No more social obligations. No more trying to be the daughter she wanted instead of the person I am. She might come back, Ethan said carefully. When the anger fades, she might, but I won't be waiting for her approval anymore. Madeline took his hands. I'm done living for other people's expectations. Yours, hers, the board's, anyone's. I'm just going to be myself and hope that's enough. It's more than enough, Ethan said quietly. Even if being myself means I'm in love with my former assistant? Especially then, Madeline smiled, and Ethan saw the weight she'd been carrying finally begin to lift. Not gone entirely, trauma doesn't disappear in a moment, but lighter, more manageable, shared. The board wants to meet with us both on Wednesday, she said, after your first day in special projects. They have questions about the relationship, about optics, about how this affects company culture. What kind of questions? The skeptical kind, the judging kind, the ones that assume I let personal feelings compromise professional judgment. Madeline's expression hardened. They're wrong, but I'll need to prove it. We'll prove it, Ethan corrected. Together. You keep saying that. Because it's true. We're partners now, not boss and assistant, not CEO and employee, partners. Partners, Madeline repeated, testing the word. I like that. They stood there in her office, hands clasped, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. Outside, San Francisco hummed with life. Inside, they were building something new from the wreckage of what came before. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and felt his blood freeze. Patricia Ross had sent him a message. It was simple, direct, devastating. Brunch is canceled. You're not welcome in my daughter's life. Stay away or I'll make sure you regret ever meeting her. Madeline saw his expression. What is it? Ethan handed her his phone. She read the message and something in her face went cold. She doesn't get to do this, Madeline said quietly. She doesn't get to threaten you. She's your mother. And she's wrong. Madeline typed something quickly on his phone, hit send before Ethan could stop her. What did you just... I told her that if she contacts you again, I'll pursue a restraining order, that her behavior constitutes harassment, that I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions. Madeline handed back his phone. And that you're staying in my life regardless of her approval. She's going to be furious. She already is. Might as well be furious about the truth. Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time, Patricia's response was longer, angrier, filled with threats about investors and reputation and social consequences. Madeline read it over his shoulder and immediately blocked the number. There, she said. Problem solved. You just blocked your mother. I blocked a person who was harassing my partner. Happens to be my mother, but that doesn't give her special privileges. Madeline met his eyes. I meant what I said, Ethan. I'm done letting her fear dictate my choices. If she can't accept us, that's her loss. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Probably, but at least we'll face it honestly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of transition planning, awkward congratulations, and pointed questions Ethan deflected with practiced professionalism. By 6 p.m., he was exhausted and ready to escape the office's scrutiny. He found Madeline in the parking garage, leaning against her Tesla, waiting. I thought you'd left already, he said. Without you, never. She held up her keys. Come on, let's get out of here. Where are we going? Somewhere that isn't here, somewhere we can just be ourselves without everyone watching. They drove north out of the city into Marin County where the roads twisted through hills covered in oak and eucalyptus. Madeline didn't explain their destination, just drove with focused intensity while Ethan watched the landscape shift from urban to wild. Finally, she pulled into a small parking area overlooking the bay. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and amber. They got out of the car and walked to the overlook, where San Francisco sprawled across the horizon, beautiful and distant. I come here sometimes, Madeline said, when the company feels suffocating, when my mother's expectations get too heavy, when I need to remember why I do this. Why do you do this? Because I believe in building something meaningful. Because I wanted to prove I could create success on my own terms, not just inherit it. She looked at him. Because for years I thought achievement was enough. That if I just worked hard enough, built something impressive enough, I'd finally feel satisfied. And now? Now I realize I was using achievement to avoid the scarier question, what do I actually want from my life? Madeline turned to face him fully. I want this. You. Us. Whatever complications come with it. Ethan pulled her close, feeling her warmth against the cooling evening air. Your mother's not going to make this easy. She never makes anything easy. The board might push back. Let them. People will gossip, judge, question whether you let feelings compromise your judgment. Then I'll prove them wrong. Madeline looked up at him, and in the golden hour light, she looked younger, freer, more herself than he'd ever seen. I spent 3 years hiding how I felt because I thought it was the responsible choice, the professional one. But the only thing it accomplished was making us both miserable. Not entirely miserable, Ethan corrected. We had Frank's Diner. We had stolen moments and careful distance and 1,000 things left unsaid. Madeline's voice was soft. I don't want that anymore. I want honest, even if honest is messy. Honest is definitely messy. Good. I'm tired of perfect. They stood there as the sun sank below the horizon, turning the bay into liquid fire. Below them, the city began lighting up, millions of individual lives, each one complicated and messy and beautiful in its own way. "What happens Wednesday?" Ethan asked. "With the board?" "We tell them the truth, that we're in a relationship, that it doesn't compromise our professional judgment, that we've taken appropriate steps to address the power dynamic." Madeline paused. "And we hope they're reasonable. And if they're not, then we deal with it, together." "You keep saying that," Ethan said, echoing her words from earlier. "Because you keep needing to hear it." Madeline smiled. "We're in this together, Ethan, whatever comes. No more rescuing from a distance. No more pretending to be just colleagues. Just us, facing everything honestly." "I like the sound of that." "Me too." They stayed until full dark, until the city was a constellation of lights below them and the stars emerged overhead. Then they drove back to San Francisco, hand in hand, ready to face whatever Wednesday would bring. Wednesday morning arrived with unexpected rain, rare for September in San Francisco, but somehow fitting. Ethan stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time, and tried to steady his breathing. His first day in special projects, his first board presentation, his first real test of whether he could maintain professional credibility while being publicly involved with the CEO. His phone buzzed. "Madeline, ready?" "As I'll ever be. You're going to be brilliant. They're lucky to have you. Or they're about to realize hiring me was a mistake. Stop. You've earned this position. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise." Ethan smiled at the screen, pocketed his phone, and headed out into the rain. The Special Projects office was on the 4th floor, tucked between legal and business development. Ethan arrived to find James already there, reviewing documents with the intensity of someone who lived and breathed quarterly reports. "You're early," James observed without looking up. Seemed appropriate for day one. "Smart." James closed his laptop. "We have 2 hours before the board meeting. I'm going to spend them making sure you understand exactly what you're walking into." For the next 90 minutes, James walked Ethan through the board's concerns, questions, and skepticism. 3 members were supportive of Madeline, had been with her since the company's founding, and trusted her judgment. 2 were neutral, waiting to see how the relationship affected company culture. And 2 were openly critical, led by Richard Thornton, a venture capitalist who'd been pushing for Madeline's replacement with more seasoned leadership for the past year. "Thornton will come at you hard," James warned. "He'll frame questions as concern for company welfare, but really, he's looking for ammunition to undermine Madeline's authority. He'll ask about favoritism, about whether your relationship influenced business decisions, about the fake emergencies." "How does he know about those?" "Patricia Ross is friends with Thornton's wife. She's been making calls, spreading her version of events." James met Ethan's eyes. "Your relationship became ammunition the moment it went public. Now we control how that ammunition is used. By being transparent. By being unshakable. You answer questions directly, without defensiveness. You acknowledge the complexity without apologizing for your feelings. And you make it clear that your professional competence exists independent of your personal relationship." James paused. "Think you can do that?" "I've been doing it for 3 years, Ethan said, just without the honesty." "Then this should be easy." The boardroom occupied the entire south corner of the executive floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. 8 chairs surrounded an enormous table made of reclaimed wood that Madeline had insisted on when the company moved to this building, something about honoring what came before while building something new. Ethan had been in this room dozens of times as Madeline's assistant, taking notes, managing presentations, being functionally invisible. Today, he sat at the table itself, a full participant, acutely aware of every board member's gaze. Madeline entered last, wearing navy blue and an expression of absolute control. She took her seat at the head of the table and met Ethan's eyes for just a moment, a flash of solidarity, of "we're in this together," before her professional mask settled firmly into place. "Thank you all for making time today," she began. "I know this meeting was scheduled somewhat urgently, and I appreciate your flexibility. We have 2 agenda items. First, introducing Ethan Cole in his new role with Special Projects, and second, addressing questions about our recently disclosed personal relationship." Richard Thornton didn't wait for her to finish. "I have several concerns about both items." "I expected you would, Richard." Madeline's tone was pleasant, neutral. Why don't you start? This company has always prided itself on professional integrity, clear boundaries, ethical conduct. Thornton leaned forward, his expression somewhere between concern and satisfaction. A romantic relationship between the CEO and a subordinate fundamentally compromises those values. Which is why Ethan is no longer my subordinate, Madeline replied smoothly. He now reports directly to James and this board. The power dynamic has been eliminated. The appearance remains. Employees will question whether Mr. Cole's promotion was merit-based or influenced by personal factors. My promotion is merit-based, Ethan interjected. James had told him to be direct, unshakable. I have 3 years of documented high performance. My reviews are available for your examination. Every raise, every expanded responsibility, every recognition I've received has been earned. Thornton turned his attention to Ethan, and the scrutiny felt like standing under a heat lamp. And yet, you were conducting a clandestine relationship with Ms. Ross for years, creating false emergencies to facilitate her personal life, using company resources inappropriately. The emergencies weren't related to our relationship, Ethan said carefully. They were responses to Madeline's mother arranging unwanted social obligations. I provided her with professional excuses to leave situations that made her uncomfortable. So you admit to misusing your position. I admit to prioritizing Madeline's well-being over strict policy adherence. Ethan met Thornton's gaze. If that's grounds for termination, I'll accept the consequences. But I won't apologize for caring about someone who is being manipulated by family pressure. Manipulated? Thornton's eyebrows rose. That's a strong word for a mother encouraging her daughter to have a social life. Patricia Ross wasn't encouraging, Madeline cut in, her voice sharp. She was controlling, setting up dates without my consent, threatening to withdraw investment if I didn't comply, using her social connections to pressure me into relationships I didn't want. She paused. Ethan gave me the freedom to choose. That's not manipulation, that's support. Support that conveniently positioned him as your romantic option. He was my romantic option because I fell in love with him. Not because he manufactured emergencies, not because he manipulated circumstances, but because over 3 years of working together, I came to respect his integrity, value his perspective, and trust him completely. Madeline's voice remained steady. The emergencies were inappropriate, we've acknowledged that, but they weren't the foundation of our relationship. They were a symptom of my inability to set boundaries with my mother. Helen Zhang, one of the founding board members, spoke up. I appreciate the transparency, Madeline, but Richard raises valid concerns about perception. How do we ensure employees don't see this as favoritism? How do we maintain company culture when the CEO is dating someone who, until recently, was her direct report? By demonstrating through action that professional standards remain unchanged, Madeline replied. Ethan's position in special projects was James's decision, based on capability assessments and departmental needs. I recused myself from the hiring discussion. Moving forward, I'll recuse myself from any decisions involving Ethan's compensation, promotion, or performance review. That creates its own problems, Thornton said. How can you be an effective CEO if you're constantly recusing yourself from personnel decisions? I'm recusing myself from one person's personnel decisions. Ethan represents approximately 0.2% of our workforce. I think I can manage. Madeline's tone was dry. Michael Okafor, another founding member, leaned back in his chair. I'm less concerned about the mechanics than the timing. Why now? Why disclose this relationship at this particular moment? Because hiding it was becoming untenable, Madeline said simply. Because we were lying to ourselves and everyone around us. Because I'm 34 years old and tired of compartmentalizing my life into acceptable and unacceptable parts. And if this relationship fails, if 6 months from now you break up and we're dealing with the fallout of a former couple trying to work together, then we'll handle it professionally, Ethan said, the same way any other employees would handle a relationship ending. You're not any other employees, Thornton interjected. Ms. Ross is the CEO, the face of this company. Her personal choices reflect on all of us. My personal choices, Madeline said, her voice hardening, are mine to make. This board has authority over my professional performance. You can evaluate my leadership, question my strategic decisions, challenge my business judgment. But my personal life is not subject to board approval. It is when it affects company reputation. How exactly does my relationship with Ethan affect company reputation? We're two adults conducting ourselves ethically. We've disclosed appropriately. We've restructured our professional relationship to eliminate conflicts of interest. Madeline leaned forward. Unless your concern isn't actually about reputation, but about control. The room went silent. Thornton's face flushed red. That's an offensive suggestion, he said tightly. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, this feels less like genuine concern about company welfare and more like an opportunity to undermine my authority. You've been pushing for new leadership for months. Now you have ammunition. Madeline's gaze was steady. So let's be honest about what this conversation is really about. Helen raised a hand. Before this devolves further, I'd like to hear from Ethan directly. You've been quiet for most of this discussion. What's your perspective? Ethan took a breath. This was the moment James had prepared him for, the chance to prove he could maintain professional credibility under pressure. I love Madeline, he said simply. I've loved her for 3 years. I never intended to act on those feelings because I understood the professional complications. But Saturday night I realized that pretending was costing us both something essential. He looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. I understand why this situation makes people uncomfortable. The power dynamic, the optics, the concern about favoritism, those are all legitimate issues, but I want to be clear about something. My professional competence exists independent of my personal feelings. I earned my place in this company. I'll continue earning it through performance, not proximity to the CEO. Pretty speech, Thornton said. But how do we trust that you'll maintain objectivity? That you won't let personal loyalty compromise professional judgment? The same way you trust any employee, by evaluating my work product. If my performance declines, if I demonstrate favoritism, if I fail to meet professional standards, then remove me. Ethan's voice was firm. But judge me on my actions, not on assumptions about my relationship. And what about the company culture? Michael asked. If the CEO can date an employee, what message does that send to everyone else? That people are human, Madeline answered. That we have policies to manage relationships appropriately, not prevent them entirely. That transparency and ethical conduct matter more than appearances. She paused. I've built this company on the principle that employees should bring their whole selves to work. That includes acknowledging that humans form connections, fall in love, build lives together. We can't expect people to compartmentalize completely. There's a difference between general employees and the CEO, Thornton persisted. Only in degree, not in kind. The same policies apply. Madeline's patience was clearly wearing thin. Richard, I understand your concerns, but unless you're prepared to present evidence that this relationship has actually compromised my professional judgment or Ethan's performance, I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. Thornton opened his mouth, closed it, then looked to the other board members for support. Helen and Michael remained neutral. The other 3 showed varying degrees of discomfort. Finally, Helen spoke. I propose we table this discussion for now. Give Ethan time to prove himself in his new role, evaluate Madeline's leadership over the next quarter, and reconvene in 3 months to assess whether this relationship has actually created problems or whether our concerns were overblown. Agreed, Michael said quickly. Several other board members nodded. Thornton looked frustrated but outvoted. Fine, but I want monthly reports on special projects, detailed documentation of Mr. Cole's contributions, and complete transparency about any company decisions that might benefit him directly or indirectly. Done, James said. I'll copy you on all relevant reports. The meeting shifted to other business, quarterly projections, product development timelines, marketing strategies. Ethan participated where appropriate, offering analysis and recommendations with the confidence of someone who'd spent 3 years absorbing every aspect of Vanguard's operations. He felt board members' eyes on him, evaluating, measuring, waiting for him to falter. He didn't falter. By the time they adjourned 2 hours later, Ethan was exhausted but exhilarated. He'd survived his first board presentation. He'd defended his position and his relationship without apology. He'd proven, at least preliminarily, that he deserved to be in that room. As everyone filed out, Madeline caught his eye and tilted her head slightly toward her office. Ethan followed at a discreet distance, aware that even innocent interactions would be scrutinized now. Inside her office, door closed, Madeline collapsed into her desk chair and laughed. "That was brutal," she said. "That was Thornton being Thornton." Ethan sat across from her. "He was looking for ammunition. We didn't give him any." "You were perfect. Direct, confident, professional." Madeline smiled. "I was proud of you. I just told a room full of venture capitalists that I love you." "You did." Very calmly, like you were discussing quarterly projections. Inside, I was panicking. "You hide it well." Madeline's expression grew more serious. 3 months. That's what we have to prove this works. Then we'll prove it. And if we can't, we will, Ethan said firmly. Because the alternative is going back to pretending, and I'm done with that. Madeline nodded, but something in her expression remained troubled. "My mother's been making calls. Thornton mentioned it, but apparently she's been more active than I realized. Talking to investors, board connections, anyone with influence, painting me as unstable, you as opportunistic. Can she actually damage the company? She can damage perception, make people question my judgment. That's almost as dangerous as actual financial impact." Madeline stood, moved to the window. "Part of me wants to call her, to try to repair things, to explain that I'm not having a crisis, I'm just finally being honest. Would she listen? No, but I keep thinking I should try anyway. She's my mother. Doesn't that obligate me to something?" Ethan moved to stand beside her. "It obligates you to honesty, not to self-sacrifice. You tried for years to be the daughter she wanted. It didn't make either of you happy." "I know, but knowing doesn't make it hurt less." "No," Ethan agreed. "It doesn't." They stood together, watching the city below, both knowing that Patricia Ross's campaign against them was just beginning, that Thornton would be looking for any misstep, that the next 3 months would test not just their professional competence, but their relationship itself. "Frank's tonight?" Madeline asked quietly. "Always." But when they arrived at the diner that evening, something felt different. The same tired waitress greeted them. The same cracked vinyl booths welcomed them. But the space that had been their refuge now felt exposed, performative. They were no longer two people stealing private moments. They were a public relationship under constant scrutiny. "It's weird, right?" Madeline said, voicing what Ethan was thinking. "Being here openly." "A little. We spent 3 years pretending these weren't dates. And now everyone knows they were, or could be, or—" She stopped. "I don't know what they are anymore." "They're us," Ethan said. "That hasn't changed." But it had changed, and they both knew it. The secrecy had provided cover, had made their connection feel special and separate from the rest of their lives. Now it was just another aspect of their public existence, subject to gossip and judgment and interpretation. "Tell me something true," Madeline said suddenly, echoing her request from months ago. Ethan thought for a moment. "I miss when loving you was simple, when it was just a feeling I carried privately, without consequences or complications. When I could rescue you and go home, and it didn't matter what anyone else thought." "That's honest." "Your turn." Madeline traced the rim of her coffee cup. "I'm terrified this won't work. Not because I don't love you, I do, completely. But because the world keeps pressing in. The board, my mother, company politics, everyone's opinions. I'm afraid we'll get crushed under the weight of other people's expectations. Then we build something stronger than their expectations." "How?" "By choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Ethan reached across the table, took her hand. "The world will keep pressing. People will keep judging. Your mother will keep trying to control. But none of that matters if we stay solid. You make it sound easy." "It's not easy, but it's worth it." Madeline squeezed his hand. 3 years. You've been sure about this for 3 years. I'm still catching up. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." They stayed until midnight, talking through fears and hopes and the practical realities of building a life together under public scrutiny. When they finally left, walking toward their separate cars because they'd agreed to maintain some boundaries for appearances, Madeline kissed him in the parking lot. Brief, soft, public. "For anyone watching," she said, Let them see we're not hiding. The following weeks settled into a rhythm that was simultaneously familiar and entirely new. Ethan threw himself into special projects with focused intensity, determined to prove his worth independent of his relationship with Madeline. James assigned him increasingly complex problems, a potential acquisition that needed due diligence, a partnership negotiation that had stalled, a crisis with a major client threatening to leave. Ethan handled each challenge with the same meticulous attention he'd brought to managing Madeline's calendar, but now the stakes were higher and the visibility was greater. Board members watched his progress. Employees speculated about favoritism. And through it all, Ethan worked to demonstrate that his competence had nothing to do with proximity to power. At the same time, he and Madeline were learning how to be together publicly. Lunch in the company cafeteria where everyone could see them. Arriving at work separately to avoid gossip about carpooling. Being scrupulously professional in meetings while everyone looked for signs of inappropriate intimacy. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. One evening in early October, 3 weeks into their public relationship, Ethan was working late on an acquisition analysis when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello?" "Mr. Cole." The voice was crisp, controlled, unmistakably Patricia Ross. "I believe we need to talk." Ethan's blood went cold. "Mrs. Ross, I thought Madeline asked you not to contact me." "My daughter is entitled to her decisions. I'm entitled to mine. And I've decided we need a conversation, adult to adult, without Madeline present to complicate things." "I don't think that's appropriate. I'm sitting in your apartment building's lobby," Patricia interrupted. "You can come down and talk to me like a civilized person, or I can come up and have this conversation in your doorway. Your choice." Ethan closed his laptop, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the elevator. His mind raced through possibilities. None of them good. Patricia Ross showing up unannounced meant she was either desperate or calculated, and he wasn't sure which was more dangerous. She was waiting in the building's small lobby, sitting on one of the modern chairs that looked stylish but felt like concrete. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, and an expression of absolute determination. "Mrs. Ross," Ethan said carefully, "what are you doing here?" "Offering you an opportunity." She stood, gestured toward the door. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. Ethan followed her outside into the cool October evening. They walked in silence for half a block before Patricia spoke. "I've spent the past 3 weeks making inquiries about you. Background, education, employment history, financial status. Everything." "That's invasive. That's protective. My daughter is involved with you. I needed to know who you are." Patricia stopped under a streetlight, turned to face him. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "An opportunist. Someone using Madeline for advancement. A man who saw dollar signs and decided to seduce his way into a fortune." She paused. "But that's not what I found." Ethan said nothing, waiting. "Your academic record is exemplary. Your previous employers speak highly of your integrity. You have minimal debt, no criminal history, no red flags that would suggest character issues." Patricia's expression was difficult to read. "By all objective measures, you're exactly the kind of man most mothers would be thrilled to see their daughter dating." "Then what's the problem?" "The problem is that you're an executive assistant dating a CEO. The problem is that you lack the social connections, the family background, the financial resources that would make this relationship advantageous for Madeline." Patricia's voice hardened. "The problem is that love alone isn't enough to build a life." "With respect, Mrs. Ross, that's not your decision to make." "No, but I can influence it." She pulled an envelope from her purse, held it out. "Inside is a check for $2 million. Take it. Leave San Francisco. Start fresh somewhere else. Build the career you deserve without the complication of being known as the CEO's boyfriend." Ethan stared at the envelope, not touching it. "You're offering me money to leave your daughter." "I'm offering you freedom. From gossip, from judgment, from constantly being measured against impossible standards. You're talented, Ethan. You could have a significant career, but not while you're attached to Madeline's reputation. I don't want freedom from her. I want a life with her." "Then you're naive." Patricia's voice wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "Do you know what happened to the last man I thought would be good for Madeline? Jonathan Hartley, Brilliant attorney, good family, perfect on paper. They dated for 8 months. Then the pressure started. Questions about his ambitions, whether he was intimidated by her success, accusations that he was using her for connections. The relationship collapsed under scrutiny. That's not going to happen to us. It's already happening. The board is watching. Investors are questioning. Employees are speculating about favoritism. How long before that pressure breaks you both? Patricia stepped closer. I'm not trying to hurt you, Ethan. I'm trying to save you both from something that will end badly anyway. Take the money. Leave with your dignity intact. No. Think about it. I don't need to think about it. I love Madeline. I'm not leaving her because you're uncomfortable with our relationship. Ethan met Patricia's eyes. And honestly, Mrs. Ross, the fact that you think I can be bought tells me you don't understand your daughter at all. She doesn't want someone who can be intimidated by pressure. She wants someone who will stand beside her through it. Patricia's expression flickered, something like pain or possibly respect. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. And when the board forces you out, when investors demand Madeline choose between her relationship and her company, when you realize that loving someone isn't enough to overcome institutional resistance, then we'll deal with it together, Ethan said firmly. But I'm not preemptively abandoning her because you're afraid of what might happen. Patricia studied him for a long moment, then tucked the envelope back into her purse. You're stubborn. I learned from watching Madeline. She gets that from her father. He was impossible to move once he made up his mind. Something in Patricia's voice softened slightly. He would have liked you, I think, would have appreciated your integrity. But you don't. I appreciate your integrity. I question your judgment. Patricia turned to walk away, then paused. Tell my daughter I miss her. Tell her I'm sorry for how I've handled this. But tell her I still think she's making a mistake. Tell her yourself, Ethan said. Ethan sound. She'd probably like to hear from you. Patricia's laugh was bitter. She blocked my number. Then send a letter, show up at her office. Do something other than bribing the man she loves to disappear. Ethan kept his voice gentle. You're her mother, Mrs. Ross. She doesn't want your approval. She wants your acceptance. There's a difference. Patricia stood there for a long moment, silhouetted against the streetlight, looking suddenly smaller and more uncertain than Ethan had ever seen her. Then she walked away without another word, disappearing into the San Francisco night. Ethan returned to his apartment, pulled out his phone, and called Madeline. Hey, she answered. I was just thinking about you. Your mother was in my building's lobby. Silence. Then, what? Ethan recounted the entire conversation, the background check, the $2 million offer, Patricia's warnings about pressure and institutional resistance. He expected Madeline to be furious, but when he finished, she just sighed. She actually offered you money? She did. How much? $2 million. Wow, that's actually more than I expected her to value you at. She usually starts lower. Madeline's attempt at humor fell flat. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry she did that. It's not your fault. She's my mother. Her behavior reflects on me, whether I want it to or not. Madeline was quiet for a moment. Did you consider taking it? No. Not even for a second? Not even for a second. Why not? $2 million is life-changing money. You could start your own company, go anywhere, do anything. I could do all of that without leaving you, Ethan interrupted. Your mother thinks I'm with you for advancement or financial security. She doesn't understand that you are the advancement. You're what makes every complication worth it. Madeline's voice when she spoke again was thick with emotion. She said she misses me. She does. She also said your father would have liked me. He would have. Dad always valued integrity over pedigree. Madeline laughed, the sound watery. He used to drive Mother crazy by inviting whoever he found interesting to dinner parties, regardless of their social standing. Engineers, teachers, the guy who fixed his car. He said interesting conversation mattered more than impressive credentials. Sounds like where you got your values. Probably. I miss him. I know. They were quiet for a moment, the phone line carrying the weight of everything unsaid. What do we do about Mother? Madeline asked finally. We give her space, let her process, and if she's ready to have an actual relationship with you, not the daughter she wants, but the woman you are, then we welcome her back. And if she's not, then we keep living our lives and hope she comes around eventually. That sounds lonely for her. It might be, but that's her choice. Ethan paused. You can't fix her fear, Madeline. You can only refuse to let it control you. When did you become so wise? Around the time I fell in love with my boss and decided complicated was worth it. Madeline laughed for real this time. Come over. I don't want to be alone tonight. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Ethan grabbed his keys and headed out into the night toward Madeline's apartment in Pacific Heights, toward the woman who'd made impossible feel possible, toward a future they were building together despite every obstacle. The next morning, Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and Madeline's arm draped across his chest. For a moment, he just lay there, absorbing the reality of waking up beside her, something that still felt new and precious and slightly unreal. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from James. Board wants progress report on the Meridian acquisition. Can you present Friday? Ethan typed back. I'll have the analysis ready. Another text, this time from an unknown number. This is Helen Zhang. Would you be available for coffee this afternoon? I have some thoughts about your role with special projects. Ethan showed Madeline the message. She read it, frowned. Helen doesn't usually reach out to employees directly. She goes through department heads. Should I be worried? I don't know. Helen's been supportive, but she's also strategic. She doesn't do anything without purpose. Madeline sat up, pulling the sheet around her. What time? She suggested 3. That's during the executive planning meeting. She'll be leaving early specifically to talk to you. Madeline's frown deepened. Be careful. Helen's not hostile, but she's also not sentimental. If she sees a problem, she'll address it directly. That afternoon, Ethan met Helen at a quiet coffee shop in the financial district, the kind of place where venture capitalists made deals over espresso. Helen was already there reviewing something on her tablet. Ethan, thank you for meeting me. She gestured to the seat across from her. I'll be direct. I'm impressed with your work so far. The Meridian analysis is thorough. Your handling of the Patterson client crisis was excellent. You've exceeded expectations. Thank you, Ethan said carefully, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I'm concerned about sustainability, not your performance, your situation. Helen set down her tablet. You're under enormous pressure, proving yourself professionally while navigating a public relationship with the CEO, dealing with Patricia Ross's interference, managing board scrutiny and employee gossip. How long can you maintain that level of stress? As long as necessary. That's not an answer. That's stubbornness. Helen's voice wasn't unkind. I've seen talented people burn out under less pressure. What's your plan when the stress becomes unsustainable? I don't have one. Because I'm not planning to fail. Everyone plans to succeed. Very few people plan for what happens when success costs too much. Helen leaned forward. I'm going to tell you something that stays between us. Richard Thornton is building a case to remove Madeline as CEO. He's been talking to investors, gathering support, positioning himself as the voice of reason concerned about leadership stability. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Based on what? Based on the relationship with you? Based on Patricia Ross's campaign painting Madeline as emotionally unstable? Based on the perception that personal complications are affecting professional judgment? Helen paused. He doesn't have the votes yet, but he's working on it. What does this have to do with me? Everything. You're the leverage point. If you step back, transfer to a different company, take a leave of absence, whatever creates distance, Thornton loses his ammunition. Madeline's position stabilizes. You're asking me to leave. I'm asking you to consider what's best for Madeline long term. Do you love her enough to protect her? Even if that means stepping away. Ethan sat back, processing. This was different from Patricia's crude attempt at bribery. This was strategic, thoughtful, coming from someone who genuinely seemed concerned about Madeline's welfare. Helen, he said slowly, I appreciate your directness. But here's what I know. Madeline doesn't need protection from our relationship. She needs protection from people who think her personal life is fair game for corporate politics. Thornton's not concerned about leadership stability. He's concerned about control. And if I leave, he'll just find different ammunition. Possibly, but at least it won't involve you. Which makes it easier for everyone except Madeline and me. Ethan met Helen's eyes. I understand why you're suggesting this, but I'm not leaving unless Madeline asks me to. We're partners. That means we face this together. Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, small, knowing. That's what I thought you'd say. What I hoped you'd say, actually. You were testing me. I was giving you an out, seeing if you'd take it. Helen picked up her coffee. Thornton's going to keep pushing. He'll make things uncomfortable, but if you and Madeline stay solid, if you keep performing at this level, he'll eventually run out of ammunition. How long? Months, maybe longer. Can you handle that? I've handled 3 years of loving her from a distance. I can handle a few months of loving her publicly. Good. Helen stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you're good for her. Madeline's been brilliant but lonely for years. She needed someone who saw her as a person, not just as a CEO. I'm glad she found you. Even though it's complicated? Especially because it's complicated. Easy relationships don't require courage. This one does. Helen smiled. Keep proving the critics wrong, Ethan. Keep being worth the fight. She left, and Ethan sat alone with his coffee, thinking about courage and criticism and the choice he'd made to love someone publicly despite every reason to hide. His phone buzzed. Madeline. How did it go with Helen? I'll tell you tonight. But it's good. I think. Good, good, or complication good? The second one. But we'll handle it. Together? Always together. Ethan finished his coffee and headed back to the office, ready to prove that love, complicated, messy, public love, could withstand scrutiny, that he and Madeline could build something real despite institutional resistance, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was choose honesty over convenience, partnership over safety, and hope that courage was enough. The months that followed Helen's warning moved with the relentless momentum of a storm gathering strength. Ethan threw himself into special projects with an intensity that bordered on obsessive, determined to prove his worth beyond any shadow of doubt. The Meridian acquisition closed successfully, bringing in $70 million in new revenue. The Patterson client crisis resolved with Patterson not only staying but expanding their contract. Every challenge James assigned him, Ethan met with meticulous precision and strategic insight that even Thornton couldn't dismiss as favoritism. But success didn't silence the critics. It just made them more creative. In mid-November, an anonymous email circulated through the company suggesting that Ethan had received preferential treatment on the Meridian deal, that Madeline had shared confidential information to give him an advantage. HR investigated and found nothing, because nothing existed, but the damage lingered in whispers and sidelong glances. Then came the article in Tech Business Weekly, When Love Compromises Leadership, a case study of Vanguard Technologies. The piece dissected Madeline's relationship with Ethan, questioned her judgment, interviewed anonymous sources who claimed company culture had suffered since the disclosure. Patricia Ross was quoted extensively, expressing concern for her daughter's well-being and the company her late husband had helped fund. Ethan read the article in his apartment at 2 a.m, unable to sleep, feeling the weight of being a liability to someone he loved. His phone rang. Madeline. Don't read it, she said without preamble. Too late. It's garbage. Anonymous sources are probably Thornton's friends. Patricia's comments are just her continuing campaign. Madeline's voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the exhaustion beneath. Our PR team will respond tomorrow. Maybe I should respond. Issue a statement, do an interview, and say what? That you're not using me for career advancement? That we're in love and everyone should mind their own business? Madeline sighed. The more we defend, the more attention we draw. We just keep doing what we've been doing. Excellent work, transparent conduct, living our lives. Your mother's quote is brutal. I know, I tried calling her. She didn't answer. Ethan heard the pain in those words. 3 months since Patricia had blocked Madeline's number, since their last conversation had ended in anger and ultimatums. 3 months of Madeline pretending she didn't care while carefully avoiding any mention of her mother in casual conversation. She'll come around, Ethan said, not believing it but needing to offer hope. Or she won't. Either way, I can't keep waiting for her approval. But Madeline's voice cracked slightly. I just wish she could see that I'm happy, actually happy, for the first time in years. Doesn't that matter more than social expectations? It should, but fear makes people cruel. They talked until dawn broke over the city, until exhaustion finally pulled them toward sleep, until the world outside started moving again, and they had to return to being the CEO and the special projects director, performing competence under constant scrutiny. December brought the 3-month board review that Helen had warned about. The meeting was scheduled for the 15th, giving Thornton exactly the platform he'd been building toward. Ethan spent 2 weeks preparing his presentation, documenting every project, every success metric, every decision that demonstrated his value to the company independent of his relationship with Madeline. The night before the meeting, he and Madeline sat in her apartment reviewing his materials one final time. She'd been unusually quiet all evening, staring at his slides without really seeing them. What's wrong? Ethan asked finally. Nothing. Everything. I don't know. Madeline set down her laptop. Thornton's going to push for one of two things tomorrow, either your removal or mine. He's been building toward this since we disclosed. Helen said he doesn't have the votes. He didn't 3 months ago, but he's been working on people, leveraging Patricia's campaign, the anonymous gossip, the tech business article. Michael's wavering. If Thornton can convince one more board member, he has enough to force a vote. Madeline looked at him, and her eyes were raw with fear. What if I have to choose? Between what? Between you and the company. Between our relationship and my position as CEO. She stood, moved to the window overlooking the city. If the board gives me an ultimatum, end the relationship or step down, what do I do? Ethan felt his chest constrict. You do what's right for you. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give. I won't be the reason you lose something you built from nothing. If it comes to that, I'll step back. And if I don't want you to step back? Madeline turned to face him. If I choose you over the company, can you live with that? Knowing I walked away from my life's work because the board couldn't handle us being together? That's not a fair question. Nothing about this is fair. Madeline's voice rose. I spent 10 years building Vanguard. I poured everything into it, time, money, relationships, my entire identity. And now I'm supposed to choose between the company and the person who makes me happy? How is that fair? It's not, but life rarely is. That's a terrible philosophy. It's a realistic one. Ethan moved toward her, pulled her close despite her resistance. But here's what I know, you don't have to choose yet. We go into that meeting tomorrow and we present the facts. Your leadership record, my performance metrics, the reality that this relationship hasn't compromised either of our professional capabilities, and we trust that reason will prevail. And if it doesn't, then we deal with it together, whatever happens. Ethan pulled back enough to see her face. But I need you to understand something. If the board forces you to choose, and you choose me, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. I will help you build something new, something that's entirely yours, something where no one can weaponize your personal life against your professional worth. Madeline's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to build something new. I want to keep what I already have. I know, but sometimes life doesn't give us that option. She kissed him then, desperate, clinging, like she was trying to memorize the moment before everything fell apart. They spent the night wrapped around each other, neither sleeping much, both knowing that tomorrow would change everything. The boardroom felt different on the morning of December 15th, colder, somehow, despite the sunlight streaming through the windows. All 8 board members were present, along with James and Jennifer from HR. Madeline sat at the head of the table in charcoal gray, her armor color, expression carefully neutral. Ethan sat beside James, his presentation materials organized with obsessive precision. Thornton wasted no time with pleasantries. We're here to evaluate whether the personal relationship between Ms. Ross and Mr. Cole has negatively impacted company performance, culture, or leadership effectiveness. He looked around the table. I've prepared a summary of concerns that have been raised over the past 3 months. What followed was a systematic dismantling of everything Ethan and Madeline had built. Thornton presented the anonymous complaints about favoritism. He highlighted the tech business article and similar press coverage suggesting leadership instability. He brought up Patricia Ross's withdrawn investment and her public concerns about Madeline's judgment. He even produced emails from two mid-level employees claiming they'd witnessed inappropriate workplace intimacy, though both accounts were vague and uncorroborated. Through it all, Madeline remained impassive, her expression giving nothing away. But Ethan could see her hands gripping the armrests of her chair, knuckles white with tension. When Thornton finally finished, Helen spoke up. "That's a compelling presentation of concerns. Now let's look at actual performance data." She pulled up a document on the screen. Company revenue is up 18% quarter over quarter. Employee satisfaction scores have increased. Client retention is at a 5-year high. Product development is ahead of schedule. She looked at Thornton. "Where exactly is the negative impact you're suggesting? The damages to reputation and company culture, which you're measuring how? Through anonymous gossip and hit pieces in tech magazines?" Helen's tone was sharp. "Show me concrete evidence that Madeline's leadership has actually suffered. Show me missed targets, failed projects, declining metrics. Show me anything other than speculation and discomfort with a relationship that makes you personally uncomfortable." "It's not about personal comfort. Then what is it about? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a manufactured crisis designed to undermine a CEO who's delivered consistent results for 10 years. Michael Okafor leaned forward. "I think Helen raises valid points, but I also think there are legitimate concerns about optics. The tech business article was widely read. Investors have asked questions. We can't ignore public perception entirely." Public perception based on what?" Madeline spoke for the first time, her voice controlled. "Based on my mother's campaign to paint me as unstable? Based on anonymous sources who won't put their names to their complaints? Based on the radical notion that a female CEO might have a personal life?" "This isn't about gender," Thornton started. "Isn't it?" Madeline stood, and Ethan saw the fury she'd been containing finally break through. "Would we be having this conversation if I were a male CEO dating a female employee? Would anyone question whether my relationship compromised my leadership? Or would they assume I was entitled to both professional success and personal happiness?" "That's not a fair comparison. It's an exact comparison. You're holding me to different standards because you can't reconcile the idea of a woman in power also being in love." Madeline's voice was steady now, clear. "I've delivered results for a decade. I've grown this company beyond anyone's projections. I've built something meaningful that employs 500 people and serves millions of users. And you want to remove me because I fell in love with someone you deem inappropriate?" "No one's talking about removal," Thornton said, but his expression suggested otherwise. "Then what are we talking about? What exactly are you proposing?" Madeline looked around the table. "That I end my relationship to satisfy your discomfort? That Ethan leaves the company despite exemplary performance? What outcome would make you satisfied?" Silence fell over the room. Ethan watched board members exchange glances, saw the calculation happening in real time. Finally, Thomas Bradford, one of the founding members who'd been silent until now, spoke. "I've been on this board since day one. I've watched Madeline build this company from a startup working out of a garage to what it is today. I've seen her make hard decisions, weather failures, persist through challenges that would have broken most people." He looked at Thornton. "And in all that time, I've never questioned her judgment. Not once. I'm not starting now just because she chose to be honest about her personal life." "Thomas," Thornton began, "let me finish. This conversation isn't about company performance. It's about control. About some outdated notion that CEOs must sacrifice personal happiness for professional success. Well, I reject that premise entirely." Thomas looked at Madeline. "You've earned the right to live your life. The board's role is to evaluate your professional performance, not police your relationships." Helen nodded. "I agree. Unless someone can present actual evidence, not speculation, not gossip, but hard evidence, that this relationship has compromised Madeline's leadership or Ethan's performance, I see no grounds for action." "The evidence is the perception," Thornton insisted. "Then we change the perception," Thomas interrupted. "We issue a statement supporting Madeline's leadership. We emphasize the company's strong performance. We make it clear that Vanguard values both professional excellence and personal authenticity. He paused. And we stop letting Richard weaponize a relationship for his own political purposes. The room went very quiet. Thornton's face flushed red. That's an offensive accusation. Is it untrue? Thomas's gaze was steady. You've been angling for leadership changes since last spring. This relationship just gave you convenient ammunition, but I'm not interested in convenient. I'm interested in what's best for the company. And what's best is keeping the CEO who's delivered consistent results. Michael cleared his throat. I'd like to hear from Ethan. You've been quiet through all this. What's your perspective? All eyes turned to Ethan. This was the moment he'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. He stood, moved to the front of the room, and pulled up his presentation. 3 months ago, you asked me to prove that my relationship with Madeline didn't compromise my professional capabilities. Here's what I've delivered since then. He walked through the slides methodically. The Meridian acquisition, the Patterson client retention, the 3 new partnership deals he'd negotiated, the crisis management protocols he'd developed. Every project was completed ahead of schedule and under budget. Every metric exceeded targets. I've received no special treatment, no preferential access, no advantage beyond what my performance earned. He paused, looking around the table. But here's what I want to address directly. The question of whether loving Madeline makes me less effective at my job. The answer is no. If anything, it makes me more effective, because she's made me braver. She's taught me that excellence isn't about perfection. It's about showing up honestly, doing the work, and refusing to let other people's discomfort dictate your choices. That's very touching, Thornton said dryly, but it doesn't address the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem, Ethan interrupted, is that you're uncomfortable with complexity. You want clean narratives where personal and professional lives don't intersect. But that's not reality. People fall in love. They build relationships. They bring their whole selves to work. And companies that deny that end up with employees who hide their authentic selves and perform constant, exhausting theater. He met Thornton's eyes directly. I understand why this situation makes you uncomfortable. It's messy. It doesn't fit neat corporate narratives. But discomfort isn't evidence of dysfunction. Sometimes it's just evidence that we're doing something new. Michael was nodding slowly. I appreciate that perspective. But I still have concerns about the anonymous complaints, which HR investigated and found unsubstantiated, Jennifer interjected. Both complaints came from employees who couldn't provide specific dates, times, or witnesses. When pressed, they admitted to basing their concerns on general feeling rather than observed behavior. So they're fabricated? Helen asked. I can't prove that, but I can say they don't meet the threshold for policy violations. Jennifer looked at Thornton. If you have actual evidence of inappropriate conduct, present it. Otherwise, we're chasing shadows. The meeting continued for another hour. Arguments and counter-arguments, data and speculation, concern and defense. By the end, Ethan felt wrung out, uncertain whether they'd won or lost or simply postponed the inevitable. Finally, Thomas called for a vote, all in favor of continuing to support Madeline's leadership and Ethan's position with special projects, without further review or interference related to their personal relationship, say aye. Helen, Thomas, Michael, and 2 other board members voted aye. 5 votes. Opposed? Thornton and his 2 allies voted no. 3 votes. Motion passes. This matter is closed. Thomas looked at Thornton. Richard, if you have concerns about company performance moving forward, bring data, but leave personal relationships out of board discussions unless they demonstrate actual professional impact. Thornton stood abruptly. I think you're all making a mistake, but I've been outvoted. He looked at Madeline. I hope you prove me wrong. I will, Madeline said simply. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some offering congratulations, others remaining pointedly silent. Ethan gathered his materials with shaking hands, trying to process what had just happened. They'd survived. Barely, but they'd survived. James approached him as the room emptied. That was quite a presentation. Was it enough? It was exactly what it needed to be. Honest, competent, unashamed. James smiled slightly. You did well, Ethan. You've earned your place here. When the boardroom finally emptied, leaving just Ethan and Madeline, she collapsed into her chair and laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. "We made it," she said. "We made it. I thought for sure Thornton had Michael. I thought—" She stopped, shook her head. "I was preparing to choose, to walk away from the company rather than end things with you." Ethan moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands. "You would have done that?" "Without hesitation. This company matters to me. But you matter more." Madeline's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "These past 3 months, I kept thinking about what my father told me before he died. He said the hardest thing about success is remembering what you were trying to achieve in the first place. That achievement without meaning is just accumulation." "And what were you trying to achieve?"